For one reason or another, Albestros and Sirius found themselves overwhelmed, their minds reeling from the cascade of shocking revelations that Khan had dropped on them. It was as if fate had decided to hand them every unimaginable twist in the universe, one after another, with no room to breathe in between. The sheer absurdity of it all was enough to make even the most stoic person question their grip on reality. First, the revelation of Khan as a chosen hero had been enough to leave them speechless. That alone was a concept they'd struggled to grasp. Then came the bombshell that he was a sixth-stage saint, a rank of power beyond their imagination. Just when they thought nothing could top that, Khan casually dropped the fact that he wasn't even from this world, a truth so alien and incomprehensible that it shattered any semblance of normalcy they clung to. But Khan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He proceeded to reveal his intentions to overthrow the Rocco's empire and take the mantle of emperor, a declaration that left both of them utterly dumbfounded. And just when they had begun to adjust to this new reality, to piece together the enormity of his plans and their place within it, Khan delivered the final, earth-shaking revelation. Out of nowhere, he introduced them to not just one, but two individuals of staggering power, a ninth-stage saint and a royal dragon. At this point, both Albestros and Sirius were teetering on the edge of mental collapse. Sirius pressed a hand to his forehead, as if checking for a fever, his expression one of sheer disbelief. Albestros, the old and seasoned craftsman who had seen much in his lifetime, resorted to the most primal method of verifying reality. He slapped himself hard. Slap! This is a dream. This is a dream, Albestros muttered to himself repeatedly, his wide eyes darting around as if the sheer absurdity of the situation would melt away upon closer scrutiny. What followed was a brief but surreal explanation from Khan about how he had encountered these two powerhouses during his time in the Zivid Empire and his exploits within the Conclave of Heroes. The narrative was almost too fantastical to be true, but the presence of the ninth-stage saint and the royal dragon served as living proof. Their very existence exuded an aura of unmatched strength that couldn't be denied. It took Albestros and Sirius time, a lot of time, to process everything. They sat in silence, their minds racing to make sense of the extraordinary truths unveiled before them. But eventually, the shock subsided, and acceptance settled in. They understood that the world had changed, that Khan's ambitions and the forces he had gathered were far beyond anything they could have imagined. Swoosh! Soon, Omega also appeared in front of Albestros and Sirius. At first, neither of them recognized him. "It is me, Sir Albestros," spoke Omega and unsheathed the katana on his left side. Shing! The blade of the katana carrying lightning flickers made an outcry. Albestros quickly remembered the blade, and now he recognized the user. "You look very different now," spoke the old blacksmith. He said so because back in the day, Omega used to wear a silver suit and black shades, far opposite to his current appearance where his entire upper body filled with tattoos was exposed. "Things happened. It's not like you haven't changed either," spoke Omega with a gentle nod. "How is the sword?" asked Albestros. "Still cuts through everything like a hot knife through a sheet of paper," replied Omega. It was right then, Khan interjected. "So, everyone has their roles and orders remembered at the back of their hands, right?" Khan's voice cut through the lingering haze of disbelief, grounding them once more in the gravity of the moment. One by one, those present nodded in affirmation, the weight of their individual tasks clear in their minds. This was no longer a story of mere survival or ambition. It was the beginning of something monumental. With their plans laid out, each step carefully calculated to serve a greater purpose, this marked the dawn of a grand strategy. A chain of events that would lead to an upheaval in the Rocco's empire. The next day, Khan, Argos, and Vildred made their way to the Bran Castle, their journey culminating at the translucent barrier that protected the Verlassen fiefdom. This barrier had stood impenetrable for centuries, forbidding saints from crossing into its domain. Only descendants of Rathnar Whitlock, the legendary peak saint, had managed to enter this region in the past 200 years. Khan turned to Vildred, the sage of preservation, his expression both inquisitive and expectant. "What do you think, master?" he asked. Vildred, the lightning dragon emperor, studied the barrier carefully, his piercing eyes glowing faintly as he analyzed its structure. After a moment, he spoke with authority. "This is a nebulous Sanquaris formation, an ancient rank magic formation, powered by a remarkably strong core. If my assumptions are correct, the core must have belonged to an intermediate 7th stage saint." He paused, his tone shifting slightly. "However, the aura emanating from this barrier, it doesn't belong to this world." Khan's eyes narrowed as he processed Vildred's conclusion. "To think I still have so much to learn from you," he said, a trace of admiration in his voice. "And you're right. The core that powers this formation once belonged to the hero of lightning. He appeared 2 centuries ago, only to be slain by the previous emperor of the Rakos Empire." Khan's gaze darkened as he continued, his voice carrying a note of frustration. "What I don't understand is how there could have been a chosen hero at the time. All the heroes were supposed to have been killed by my predecessor." Vildred's expression grew contemplative. "There are ways to circumvent even death," he said, his tone steady and deliberate. "And he was a chosen hero wielding divine abilities. Alternatively, it's possible that someone found a way to use the core of the previous hero of lightning, assimilating it into their body. That would grant them the hero's strength, though not their divine abilities." Khan nodded thoughtfully, his mind working through the implications. "That could explain how the previous emperor managed to defeat a chosen hero, even as a 7th stage saint," he mused. "But no matter. That mystery isn't our concern right now. We need to act." Argos, the Revenant sovereign, stepped forward, his expression grim and determined. "We don't have time to dwell on it," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Once we breach this formation, we'll only have 10 hours at most." With that, the Vampire King summoned a massive, obsidian greatsword, its edge glimmering ominously with otherworldly energy. He glanced back at Khan and Vildred, his crimson eyes glowing. "Get behind me, unless you want to be caught in the aftermath." Without hesitation, both Khan and Vildred teleported 10 kilometers into the sky, fully aware of what was about to unfold. From their vantage point, they watched as Argos prepared to unleash his power. Vildred raised his hands, casting a legendary rank isolation barrier that encompassed a 50-kilometer radius around the region. His magic shimmered as it took hold, ensuring that the immense destructive force about to be unleashed would be contained. Simultaneously, he used a separate spell to teleport all living creatures in the area to safety, sparing them from the impending chaos. As the preparations were finalized, the air grew thick with tension. Argos stood before the barrier, his towering form emanating a palpable aura of death and power. The stage was set, and the next moments would determine whether they could pierce the ancient formation and unlock the secrets of the Verlassen fiefdom. Rumble. Tremble. Both the surrounding 20-kilometer radius shook while the reality itself started to rupture. Boom! Suddenly, Argo's obsidian greatsword, carrying the aura of blood and darkness, suddenly appeared high in the sky, now turning into a 3-kilometer-long weapon. Just the sheer size of the weapon shook Khan to his core, leaving goosebumps all over his body. "Is this the true strength of a sovereign?" wondered Khan. "No, this is just one of his special moves, and I don't think he's even using 30% of his true power," responded Rathnar, the peak saint in Khan's mind. "Are you kidding me? That sword is as tall as Blackwell in his mythical rank primordial titan form. And you're telling me it's not even half of his strength?" he asked Rathnar. Meanwhile, Argos finally powered up the sword just enough to not destroy the nearby 100-kilometer radius by mistake. His countenance turned grim as he spoke in a domineering voice. "Lunar extinction." Khan and Vildred observed from the safety of the skies as Argos, the 9th stage saint and one of the 4 sovereigns of Vantria, prepared to demonstrate the true extent of his might. Before them, the obsidian greatsword in Argos's grip gleamed ominously, its sheer size casting an immense shadow that swallowed the forest for 3 kilometers. The translucent barrier shielding the Verlassen fiefdom, a towering wall of ancient magic stretching 40 kilometers into the sky, stood as the ultimate challenge, unbroken and impenetrable for over a century. Argos moved without hesitation, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Lunar extinction. With those words, the Vampire King swung his colossal weapon in a devastating arc. Slash! Boom! An ear-shattering noise followed as the great sword cleaved through the atmosphere, its force turning the world black and white in an instant. The monochromatic void engulfed everything within its reach as if the strike itself had severed the fabric of reality. Khan, hovering a safe distance of 10 kilometers away, felt the devastating effects ripple outward. Even at such a distance, his body seized up as if time itself had been paralyzed. His movements ceased. The air around him grew unnaturally still, and even the faintest sounds were consumed by an oppressive silence. Beside him, Vildred, the mighty lightning dragon emperor, was no less affected. Both of them, beings of unparalleled strength, were rendered motionless. The very concept of time seemed frozen in a 100-kilometer radius as the overwhelming might of Argos's attack unfolded. Crack! A fracture appeared on the surface of the barrier, a sound like shattering glass echoing in the void. Shatter! In the next moment, the impenetrable barrier, which had stood as an unyielding defense for centuries and defied the combined strength of peak 7th stage saints, gave way. It splintered and dissolved into shimmering fragments under the calculated and precise might of Argos's strike. The revenant sovereign lowered his weapon, his expression calm, almost indifferent, as if the annihilation he had wrought was merely routine. The silence that followed was deafening, the world struggling to adjust after such a monumental display of power. Khan and Vildred exchanged glances, awe evident even in their composed expressions. The barrier, a testament to ancient magic and resilience, had been obliterated in a single controlled attack. The reality within the affected area now returned to normal as a massive 12-kilometer wide and 20-kilometer long gateway was opened. The barrier itself wasn't completely destroyed, just broken in this area with Argos' attack as per their plan. Let's go. It will repair itself within 10 hours and we will die if we fail to dismantle it from within the source. The nebulous Sanquaris formation is famous for its reliability in the history of the world for a reason, spoke Vildred, the sage of preservation. Soon, they all boarded the Bran Castle and it flew towards the southern region of the fiefdom at lightning speed, heading towards a specific location. As for Tobias and Omega, they had already left for Aesir, the capital of Verlassen, yesterday night to accomplish their own given tasks. 1 hour later, the Bran Castle stopped amidst dozens of mountains as a grand valley that had a 100-meter-tall white gate, with a path leading to an unknown area now came into sight. This was the entrance to the Forbidden Zone that Khan once ventured into with his subordinates 5 years ago. The valley they floated above was the exact place where Khan and his generals also fought a legendary rank monster called Vilgax. The devastation caused by our battle back then is still visible, though covered in flora and fauna now, spoke Khan. From here on, they couldn't use the Bran Castle due to its massive size. All of you stay here, ordered Argos to his royal knights, a group that had 8 saints as part of it. Soon, the trio passed through the gate leading to the Forbidden Zone. What came into their sights was a vast, devastated land. But Khan knew that this was just the first layer of what was inside. There, their supersonic speed, they kept traveling until reaching a destructed landmark. This was the place where Khan and his group had fought Skoll and Hattie, the mythical rank descendants of Godbeast Fenrir. It was also the same place where Omega was evolved into the Hrodvitner mythical rank form. This place is left exactly the same after that fight, which means no one was able to enter afterward. This Forbidden Zone allows only semi-saints. I'm here again because the main barrier is now broken and all the restrictions are off till it repairs itself, said Khan as their trio continued. After a dozen minutes, they entered the second later. Khan had a vivid memory of this place because he fought the mythical rank guardian dragon, who had the darkness element. This opponent later became the very forging ingredient that all of his and his subordinates' legendary rank armors, weapons, and clothes were made of. One of my kin was here, spoke Vildred with a serious tone. Yes, he was captured within the Dragon Empire by one of the previous emperors of the Rakos Empire. Then he was sealed here for around 300 years before he met me and died at my hands. Whoosh! Khan then took out Lucifer and Gungnir. 90% of my weapons and even my Dracos armor were made from his corpse. We used everything including the bones. Spoke Khan as he truthfully revealed what happened back then. What absurd luck do you have? If not for him being a darkness elemental dragon and you being the hero of darkness with complete immunity to it, you would have certainly died here. Spoke Argos with a contemplative expression. Vildred on the other end was slightly irritated. Rathnar, looks like your descendants did possess your knack for invading the Dragon Empire to fulfill your goals. You killed my cousin to forge your weapon, and now I hear that one of your descendants captured one of my kin. Even if he was a lesser dragon, he was still part of the communion of dragons. That alone is reason enough for the Dragon Empire to wage war against the Rakos Empire. Spoke Vildred with now visible frustration. Hey, don't blame me. I was sealed in here back then too. My descendants used your kin to guard the entrance. Besides, it's not like it would have been possible to do without the approval from the current Dragon Emperor. Retorted the Peak Saint. What? Are you implying that my brother allowed this? Exclaimed Vildred with visible fury. Who is your brother, to be so influential to the point that even a lesser dragon's capture was allowed? Asked Argos. Even now, he had no idea about Vildred's real identity as the previous Dragon Emperor. Nothing important, though he will answer to me one day. Spoke Vildred and flew towards the final entrance. It's their family matter. We best not get involved. You know how secretive these dragons are. Replied Khan to Argos telepathically. Soon, they too followed behind the sage and entered the gateway leading to the final lair. Now they saw the Imperial Castle where Khan had found Rathnar and the Tablet of Arcana. Khan led both Vildred and Argos to the machination of the formation he saw back all those years ago thanks to his eidetic memory. A massive 20-meter-tall towering mechanism with rotating multiple magical devices. Cranks. A marvelous construct radiating overwhelming might. That's the core. Spoke Khan as he pointed at the center where a 10-meter-tall glowing golden orb shimmered. All right, give me a couple of hours. Spoke the sage magician as he cracked his neck and prepared to dismantle this formation. Khan and Argos could only watch as the expert worked his charm. Because they knew only how to destroy something like this with pure might and not methodically dismantle it. Even though Khan was also taught how to undo these formations, his skill was not on par with Vildred to just finish it in a couple of hours. It would take Khan at least 10 hours even with his incredible talent. But time was not a luxury for them and the clock was ticking fast. Finally, after 2 hours, rumble! A massive golden light shot above the skies of the Imperial Castle, and as if acting as a beacon, several beams of light also shot up towards the sky from various parts of Verlassen fiefdom that stretch up to 8,000 kilometers in its total span. And finally, it's done, said Vildred as he used his aura to pull down the core of the previous hero of lightning. Old man, is that realm ready? Asked Khan. It is, but know that you can't go deeper than the 3rd level, or you will lose control of your mind and forever be stuck there. Replied Rathnar. Khan then turned his gaze towards Argos and spoke. They will notice it soon. They still have spies in Verlassen. So please safeguard the borders for a while without revealing your existence, said Khan as he requested the Vampire King. Swoosh! Argos nodded and disappeared from the hall. Be cautious, spoke Vildred. Khan nodded and summoned the Tablet of Arcana. This was the original place Khan found the Tablet of Arcana, and now he brought it back here again after exactly 620 chapters. Whoosh! Khan disappeared inside the tablet, entering the Chamber of Exaltation while Vildred summoned a sofa to rest and guard the tablet. 2 days later, step, Khan reappeared out of the tablet. Vildred then took a look at his disciple and a visible smile appeared on his face. Because the air around Khan had become heavy and terrifying since he had become a 7th stage saint. In the span of just a few days, Khan had achieved a feat that defied the very conventions of Vantria's natural order. From being an intermediate 6th-stage saint, he had ascended to a beginner 7th-stage saint, a progression so rapid that it would have seemed impossible to any observer well-versed in the limits of their world. By the standards of Vantria, such an elevation in strength would typically require years of relentless training, even for someone as extraordinary as a chosen hero. For Khan, the average expectation would have been at least 2 more years, even with his divine blessings and the unique abilities bestowed upon him by the God of Darkness. However, this sudden rise in strength wasn't out of luck or by accident. It was all according to the plan. One thing Khan was clear of, that whether awakened or unawakened, a chosen hero's core was the best way to quickly break through to the next stage compared to other sources like a higher-ranked saint or a mythical monster. First, it happened with Hero of Fire where, after killing the hero, he instantly became a 2nd-stage saint. And then within a year, he broke through to 3rd-stage saint rank. The 4th-stage saint rank was achieved by Khan through making the contract of familiarity with Vildred, the Lightning Dragon Emperor. And after becoming a 5th-stage saint through his own effort, Khan met Marcus Brutus, the 7th hero of nature, sealed within the peninsula made by the god of nature in Hesperides. As a parting gift, Marcus Brutus gave Khan his core, and with its help, he became a 6th-stage saint. Ever since then, he has been to the Empire of Space, trained under Miyamoto Musashi, and even fought against the Hero of Space as an intermediate 6th-stage saint. However, after setting their plans in the Abyss Empire, Khan decided to take over the Rakos Empire. Now, although he had Rathnar's core, Khan had his resignation to absorb it completely, because although he met the eligible criteria, he would still need at least 5 years till his body adapted to his new rank, and only then he could use the Peak Saint's core to become a 7th-stage saint. But he didn't have time given how they only had 6 months before the Great War began. Thus, after meeting Albestros and Sirius, Khan let Argos and Vildred know about the barrier surrounding the Verlassen fiefdom, because the source of this ancient barrier did indeed belong to a chosen hero, and given their current plans, it was Khan's best option to break through to a higher rank extremely quickly. The result? Now Khan could even go toe-to-toe against the leaders of the noble factions. There wasn't a single person who could kill Khan in the entire Rakos Empire. Argos and Vildred playing their part in helping Khan was also planned before I even introduced either of them. And now everything is connected and coming together. Good. Let us hurry then. People must have started noticing it, especially all the 7th-stage saints from the noble factions. Spoke Vildred. Yes, Sir Argos can temporarily mask the absence of the barrier, but he said he can cover over 1,000-kilometer area at best even as a 9th-stage saint. And other than the north, that is full of snowy mountains, there are 3 different entry regions to Verlassen. If he covers one, the other 2 places are still out of his reach. Even with your skills, we would have been able to cover 300 kilometers at most. And both Omega and Tobias aren't strong or skilled enough to perform the similar feat as Sir Argos. Responded Khan. This was the reason why Khan sent Argos away, to delay the detection of the barrier being broken permanently. Why not use that brat Rathnar's core? I can rearrange the nebulous Sanquari's formation to allow only us an entry, just like his descendants ensured that only they could enter even after becoming a saint. Said Vildred. No, master. Rathnar's core is too precious and I have other plans for it when the time is right. Besides, there's no point in having this barrier after I become the emperor. Elaborated Khan. Well, let us depart then. We have much to do. Where to now? Asked the sage. Khan replied with a content smile as he spoke. To my old house. Right after leaving the Forbidden Zone, Khan and Vildred were escorted to the Bran Castle by Argos' royal knights. Most of them were puzzled but hiding their immense surprise since Khan wasn't deliberately hiding his aura either. Did the young lord break past his rank? He was definitely a 6th-stage saint just a couple of days ago. Spoke a werewolf lance warrior with a massive shield in his left hand. To think it's only been 7 years since he was summoned. Even Sir Lucian became a 7th-stage saint after almost 400 years. At this rate, I wouldn't be surprised if he surpasses our Lord within a decade. said a female black-haired vampire with a rapier on her waist. Well, the summoned heroes are called upon because of their immense potential. Their souls are far superior to ours. Armed with divine abilities, they can reshape the fate of the world. All we can do is just be useful to them and our Lord," replied the werewolf saint. After 2 hours, they finally reached Khan's home, the place he was forced to evacuate 5 years ago after needing to flee the Rocco's empire. As for those who couldn't recall, it was the castle of the sovereign of Verlassen, at the very center of Asir, the capital of the fiefdom. Both Khan and Vildred left the invisible Bran castle and teleported right into the main throne hall. "You've arrived, Master," Omega said, helping Tobias with certain matters according to their plans. Khan then glanced at Tobias, who was sitting on his old red throne, with golden dragon heads protruding from the armrests. "So is it done?" he queried to the ritualist general. "Yes," replied Tobias respectfully while slightly bowing his head. "And what about them?" asked Khan to Omega. "All preparations are finished. We are ready to act for the next phase," reported Omega. "Good. Tobias, you shall remain here for the time being. Now that the barrier is gone, you are free to reveal your strength as a 5th stage saint if someone tries to create trouble. Do not show any mercy regardless of the faction they are from," said Khan. Swoosh! A black shadow jumped out of Khan's feet and another person emerged, adorning scholarly robes. This was one of Khan's cosmic replicas. And now that Khan himself was a 7th stage saint, the replica itself had the full strength of a 6th stage saint. "Both of you, wait till I give the signal," said Khan in a commanding tone. Khan then didn't wait, reminiscing since time was of the essence. "Where are we going next, Master?" asked Omega. "We're going to the capital, Rathna," said Khan, his eyes turning bloodshot red. His murderous aura started leaking, shaking the whole castle. To return some old favors. The following morning, Khan, Vildred, and Omega made their way into Rathna, the grand capital of the Rocco's empire. The sight before them was a testament to the city's magnificence and fortified nature. Towering walls, rising to 80 meters, surrounded the city, their imposing presence a symbol of the empire's impenetrable defenses. Above, floating security islands hovered, overseeing the air traffic while monitoring the capital for any potential threats. The airspace was bustling with activity. Massive cargo and transportation ships moved in and out, their hulking forms dwarfing the smaller, private vessels. Among them were heavily armored warships, stationed to ensure the security of the city's borders. It was clear that Rathna was more than just a city. It was the beating heart of the Rocco's empire, a fortress designed to withstand any incursion. However, Khan's group had to exercise caution. The Bran Castle, his mobile fortress, couldn't be brought here. The security mechanisms at the capital's borders were too advanced and would immediately detect an unregistered and unidentified property like the castle, categorizing it as an invader battleship. To avoid drawing attention, Khan relied on his mastery of the true dimension, a power that allowed him to bypass even the most intricate of barriers. With unparalleled precision, Khan, Vildred, and Omega effortlessly maneuvered past the city's formidable defenses. The guards, magical detection arrays, and surveillance systems were none the wiser as the group casually infiltrated the capital. An hour later, their journey led them to the northern section of Rathna, specifically to the 157th district, better known as the Rukhan district. This area had a unique significance for Khan. It was a district filled with activity, home to countless industrial sites and factories, where the hum of machinery and the buzz of laborers filled the air. Within the true dimension, the trio hovered above a particular factory. It was no ordinary site. It was the birthplace of the Bloodborne Blacksmithing Company. After Albestros moved to the border of Verlassen fiefdom, establishing a new base of operations near the enigmatic land, the original factory in the Rukhan district underwent a significant transformation. It no longer served as the core of the Bloodborne Blacksmithing Company, but instead became a crucial branch, a distribution hub for the capital. Finished products from the main headquarters were stored here, and then delivered throughout Rathna and beyond, ensuring the company's influence remained strong within the empire's heart. Despite its importance, the factory had no saint-level protectors stationed there. Yet, this didn't make it vulnerable. Only a fool would dare cause trouble for Albestros, the most celebrated blacksmith in the Rocco's empire. Even leaders of noble factions, powerful and influential as they were, sought his favor and respected his craftsmanship. To cross him was to invite ruin. Standing atop the facility and gazing down at its bustling operations, Khan's expression turned somber and reflective. "This place made me realize that I wasn't just responsible for myself," he said, his tone heavy with the weight of the past. "I became responsible for everyone who worked for me, their lives, their livelihoods." The memories surged back, vivid and unrelenting. In the early days, when Khan was still building his empire, he had unknowingly walked into a battlefield of political and economic power plays. His attempt to lower the prices of his products to outmaneuver the competition seemed like a smart business strategy. But it wasn't allowed by the Chamber of Commerce, an institution heavily influenced by those in power, who had no tolerance for disruptors like him. What followed was a brutal retaliation. Those who couldn't beat him in fair competition resorted to hiring an underworld organization known as the Red Right Hand. Their methods were merciless and indiscriminate, killing over 100 of Khan's employees as a warning. The factory became a blood-stained reminder of how dangerous the game of power could be. Khan clenched his fists as he recalled the aftermath. "I didn't just sit back and watch," he said, his voice steely with resolve. "I tracked down their base, uncovered every last one of them." His tone turned cold, a stark contrast to the nostalgic warmth moments earlier. "I destroyed the entire organization, burned them to the ground, and I made sure 90% of those murderers never saw another sunrise." Vildred and Omega stood silently beside him, neither speaking nor interrupting. They understood this was a deeply personal moment for Khan, a moment tied to his growth, not just as a leader but as someone who bore the weight of countless lives. "This factory," Khan continued, his voice softening, "isn't just a place of business. It's a reminder that the cost of power is steep, and protecting those who depend on you requires strength. Not just physical, but the will to do whatever it takes." It was then that Khan felt it, a peculiar sensation deep within his chest, as though an invisible string tethered to his heart was gently being pulled, guiding him. It wasn't painful or overwhelming, but it was undeniable, like a subtle yet persistent beacon calling to him. "I've felt it ever since we entered the capital," Khan said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Looks like this is a sign of who I'm meant to meet first." Vildred raised an inquisitive brow, but his sharp eyes glimmered with understanding. "A connection, you say? Perhaps it's fate, or someone tied to your past." Omega, ever the silent shadow, gave a slight nod of acknowledgement and spoke with a smirk. "It is both." A few more hours passed and Khan's group left the capital. "Where are we going? Do you even know the directions?" asked Vildred, the sage. "I'm just following my heart," responded Khan as they paced through the true dimension and finally reached vast, dilapidated city ruins. Boom! At this moment, a massive shockwave was felt by them, but the key difference was that no skirmish was appearing in front of their eyes. "It's an isolation barrier hiding a battle between saints," spoke the royal dragon. "Safna Elam Suriora," chanted Khan, and soon, a previously invisible barrier appeared. Their trio passed through the barrier, their presence still undetected and unknown by those within. What the trio then encountered was a battle to death between two fifth-stage saints. Khan, Omega, and Vildred quietly saw the ensuing battle between two fifth-stage saints. Both of these figures were familiar to him, because on one end was the Renowed and strongest swordsman of the Rocco's empire, who seemed to have become a fifth-stage saint in just 5 years after Khan left. On the other end was a particular woman, a sorceress by class, who had the deepest and most meaningful connection to him in this life. The battlefield was a wasteland of destruction as the sorceress faced off against Stronov, a master swordsman whose skill had earned him the title of the best in the Rocco's empire for decades. found himself overwhelmed in a fight he never imagined possible, because had summoned a being in front of him, something that shook his body to the core by sheer surprise. "How come you're a fifth-stage saint, and not a second-stage saint?" asked Stronov, his arms bleeding. High above him, towering at an unbelievable 5 kilometers, stood Sorceress's summoned deity, Hachiman, the deity of archery and weapons. Clad in an ethereal, radiant suit of samurai armor that shimmered with divine energy, Hachiman was a behemoth. The sheer presence of the deity caused the ground to quake and the air to grow thick with overwhelming pressure. Mountains collapsed, rivers dried up, and the ruins of the dilapidated city crumbled simply from the weight of Hachiman's aura. Hachiman's bow, nearly 3 kilometers tall itself, was strung with golden energy. Arrows, each 2 kilometers long and 200 meters wide, radiated power as they materialized. Each release was an apocalyptic force. One arrow shattered the sky with a deafening roar and obliterated everything in a 3-kilometer radius upon impact. Even the shockwaves from the arrow's release sent fissures tearing through the earth. Stronov charged forward, his blade gleaming with potent energy. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, each capable of cutting mountains in half, but they barely scratched the surface of Hachiman's impenetrable armor. Stronov's movements were precise, calculated, and deadly, but utterly futile. "How is this possible?" he exclaimed, panting as his body struggled against the oppressive force emanating from the deity. "I'm using some of my best skills that have made me unrivaled in the Rocco's Empire as the best swordsman for decades now. Yet I can't even make a scratch." The colossal deity gazed down at the struggling swordsman. His voice echoed like thunder across the battlefield, calm but filled with overwhelming authority. "The problem doesn't lie with you, swordsman. My contractor is simply too powerful and able to bring forth 50% of my strength when I am summoned. And that 50% is more than enough to kill a 7th-stage saint, despite the restraints of time." Hachiman moved, unsheathing a katana that matched his own godly proportions. One swing of the blade was enough to raze entire sections of the ruins to smithereens, the sheer wind pressure reducing what remained to dust. Stronov leaped back, narrowly avoiding instant death, but the gap in power was undeniable. In the background, Sorceress stood within a dark energy barrier, her eyes cold and resolute. Her hands glowed with the ethereal light of her contract, maintaining her connection to Hachiman. She was utterly composed, her gaze fixed on her opponent. "Do you want me to play with him some more?" asked the deity, his tone almost casual, as if the battle wasn't worth his full attention. "No," replied the sorceress, her voice emotionless but firm. "I never wanted to see him suffer for long. He just has to die. That's all." The ruins were eerily quiet, save for the crackle of residual energy lingering in the air. Stronov, battered and cornered, knelt with his giant sword plunged into the ground for support. Across from him stood Sorceress, her black battlemage attire glowing faintly with runic energy as she maintained her connection to the towering deity, Hachiman, who loomed above them like an unshakable mountain. "End him quickly," Sorceress ordered, her tone cold and unfeeling, as if Stronov's life held no more value than a flickering candle. Desperate, Stronov raised his voice, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. "Listen, even if you kill me, it won't quell your anger. I'm more useful to you alive than dead." "And why should I spare you?" Sorceress asked, her voice sharp and cutting as her gaze bore into him. "Because we share blood?" "Yes," he snapped, seizing on the sliver of hope. "We're family in the end. Whatever problems we have, they can be solved by talking." Sorceress's lips twisted into a bitter smile, but there was no humor in it. "Funny, the bond of blood didn't seem so important to you all those years ago when I lost my powers. Had I not regained them, I'd be nothing but some degenerate noble bastard's plaything by now. And you, my family, wouldn't have even cared to check what kind of pain and suffering I was living through." Her voice carried an edge of venom, each word striking like a dagger. "The bond of blood is no thicker than water, it seems." Stronov's face twisted in anger and desperation. If that's so, then why me in particular? All the elders, even your parents, had a part to play in what happened. I just took the opportunity like anyone else would have in my position. He stood shakily, pointing his sword at her. What kind of father wouldn't want his daughter to prosper and rise above? That's funny, Sorceress replied, her voice icy and controlled. Given how you didn't even console your daughter on the day she was beaten to a pulp during that match all those years ago by him. Her gaze darkened, her words laced with disdain. And from what I've heard, you even tried to make him your son-in-law before the competition even began. You were already trading your daughter to advance your own ambitions. Her words hit Stronov like a physical blow, but he still tried to retort. Before he could, Sorceress raised a hand, silencing him with a glare. Do not assume I'm a fool who'd believe the lies of a man like you, she continued, her voice unwavering. You have proven time and time again that you'd sell your own blood if it meant another step toward power. And now you stand here, begging for your life, claiming family matters to you. Stronov's grip tightened around his massive sword as he prepared to unleash a powerful move. His face, twisted with a mix of desperation and resolve, betrayed the weight of his next words. Then make me a promise. If I die here, you will leave her alone. She had nothing to do with your fall within the clan. She was a pawn, just like you were. Sorceress's raven-black hair swayed with the faint energy rippling from her summoned deity, Hachiman, who stood silently in the backdrop like an unmoving sentinel of destruction. Her gaze was sharp and unrelenting as she retorted, "And why would I do that? Her betrayal hurt more than yours. Although we are cousins, she was like a sister to me. Yet in the past 5 years, she still hasn't apologized. Not once." Her voice was laced with venom, her words echoing with the pain of unresolved wounds. Even now, the whole clan thinks I'm just a second-stage saint, just like Veronica. If she felt guilty, she wouldn't be trying so hard to surpass me and become the next matriarch. Stronov scoffed, shaking his head as he tried to reason with her. So that's what this is about? You want to become the leader of our clan? Sorceress's eyes narrowed. You think this is just about power? About titles? You don't understand a thing, Stronov. Undeterred, Stronov pressed on, his tone growing sharper. Then you're truly foolish. Even if you became a 5th-stage saint, you should have waited a few more decades. Your father himself is on the verge of becoming a 7th-stage saint. Killing me now would only put the entire clan on alert. They'd never let you be unmarried for the next century. Hell, the man they'd marry you to, or even your children, would have a better chance of claiming the clan leadership than you ever would. He scoffed again, his laughter bitter and mocking. There's no way killing me, Veronica, or even the elders who proposed that exchange will help you sit in that position. Sorceress's lips curled into a dark, vengeful smile, her aura flaring as her connection with Hachiman intensified. The towering deity's presence became almost suffocating, the ground trembling beneath the weight of its power. There is one way, though, she said, her tone chillingly calm yet dripping with malice. Stronov's brow furrowed in confusion, but Sorceress continued before he could respond. If I kill him as well and then reveal my true strength, no one in the clan would dare deny me my claim. Stronov's eyes widened in utter disbelief, his grip tightening on his sword as he spat. Are you out of your mind? You'd kill your own father. Sorceress's expression remained cold and unwavering, her tone laced with icy disdain as she retorted, Why? Are only sons allowed to kill their fathers to claim their throne? Or are you suggesting patricide is a privilege reserved for men? Her words stung like a whip, and she continued, stepping forward with calculated purpose. Besides, who said I care about the acknowledgement of the Elder Council? Their time is long over. I'm killing them as well. Stronov's face twisted in horror, his mouth moving as if to protest, but no words came out. Sorceress's dark aura flared, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. And honestly, I don't even care if the entire clan falls to ruins. She spoke with a vengeful tone. I, Cassandra Michelson, shall show no mercy. Cassandra Michelson, one of the only two people in the entire Vantria who had the deity summoner ancient rank class, now faced his paternal uncle, Stronov Michelson, in a battle to the death. One after another, she explained her reasoning on why she was trying to kill him after revealing her true rank as a fifth-stage saint. And now, she declared that she wouldn't even spare her clan if it meant exacting her revenge. Her words hung in the air like a death knell. The silence was deafening, save for the faint hum of power radiating from her summoned deity, Hachiman, whose towering presence loomed ominously behind her. "I have been chained," Cassandra declared, her voice rising with conviction. "Chained since birth by my blood, my lineage, and the expectations placed upon me as the daughter of the clan leader for my entire life. Every decision, every path, every breath was dictated by the whims of those who only saw me as a tool to further their greed." Her heavy tone turned grim. She clenched her fists, her raven-black hair whipping around her as the winds of her power surged. "But no more. I do not wish to live for the sake of those who wished for my destruction and peril. Not my father. Not the elders. Not the clan. No one," she declared firmly. Her gaze bore into Stronov like daggers, and for the first time, he saw not the niece he once knew, but a storm, a force of nature, unrelenting and untamed. "You're doing all this just for a petty reason like that?" exclaimed Stronov in rage. "That petty reason is my entire life," replied Cassandra with a cold tone. "You're mad," Stronov finally muttered, his voice trembling with disbelief and fear. "This isn't justice. This is madness." Cassandra tilted her head slightly, a faint, almost amused smile playing on her lips. "Justice?" she echoed, as if tasting the word and finding it bitter. "Justice died the day my clan betrayed me. What I seek isn't justice. It's liberation. From them, from their control, from their hypocrisy. And if that means destroying everything they hold dear, then so be it." With those words, she raised her hand, her command echoing in the air. "Hachiman, prepare the final strike." "Gladly. I'm tired of fighting this weakling. Next time, summon me when you fight an actually strong opponent," spoke the deity. As the final moment of their battle came, both sides prepared their most powerful strike. Stronov's 2-kilometer-long version of Giant's Word started whirling while dozens of hurricanes destroyed the area in a 5-kilometer radius. Meanwhile, on Cassandra's side, the summoned deity also let go of its bow, and the bow itself prepared 3 arrows. And while that happened, the deity quickly took out the katana on its waist. And the very next moment, boom! An earth-shattering and sky-trembling clash shook the entirety of the 50-kilometer radius, causing earthquakes and incinerating everything on the battlefield. After 3 minutes, the cloud of dust finally settled, and at the bottom of a 700-meter deep crater stood Cassandra, looking at Stronov's corpse that was cut halfway from the middle. "See you later, my contractor," spoke Hachiman, the deity of archery and weaponry, as he disappeared into nothingness. Cassandra, on the other hand, had a somber expression. There was a time when she looked up to her uncle as a child. But now, no matter how it hurt, she knew that killing him here was the correct decision in the wake of her revenge. It was right then. She gently touched her heart and spoke. "I know you're here. I could feel you from thousands of kilometers away." She spoke with a longing expression. Whoosh! Khan then appeared in front of Cassandra. Even now, both of them wore the same attire they had 5 years ago. The only difference was they both had matured and were even more refined with age and experience. Khan then smiled gently as he asked, "Are you the same woman from that night?" His question seemed quite obscure to Omega, Vildred, and Rathnar. But Cassandra, on the other end, understood the intent as she recalled their last conversation all those years ago. "No, I'm far cold, conceited, and manipulative. I have learned not to show any mercy, but I have also learned to strategize and hide my capabilities. My ruthlessness will eventually engulf all of my enemies when the time is right," replied Cassandra with a mischievous smirk. "Are you the same man from that night?" she asked in return with a widened smile. Khan also grinned and responded playfully, "No, I'm far stronger, merciless, and even more diabolical than I ever was. But like I promised someone, I've returned only after becoming the strongest person in this entire empire," he declared. Boom! Khan revealed his insurmountable aura as a seventh-stage saint, shocking Cassandra. "And I wish to exact vengeance upon those who sought my death and destruction. However, there was someone I wished to share these victories with," he iterated firmly. "At the end of the day, what's the point in becoming a king if you don't have a queen?" he asked. Step. Khan slowly knelt in front of Cassandra and raised his right hand, his palm stretched in front of her. "Would you join me in this conquest, my queen?" asked Khan with a charming smile. Omega raised both his thumbs, hyping up Khan from the side. "Ugh, so cringy and tacky. All couples should die," spoke Vildred, the Lightning Dragon Emperor, the 2,000-year-old virgin. "Depends. If this king wishes to take me as his partner in this conquest, or treat me as a mere trophy," spoke Cassandra in a playful tone. "I'm no such fool, my lady. It shall always be me and you against this world," beckoned Khan, adding even more flair to the act. "Good answer. A certain someone raised my standards in men way too high a long time ago. I shall only accept such a man who will remain at my side regardless, even if the world turned against me," spoke Cassandra as he placed her right palm in Khan's. "This lady shall accept your proposal, my king," said Cassandra. "Are these two screwed in the head? Who talks like that after being apart for so long?" spoke Rathnar. "That's the difference, old man. A woman who truly loves you will act along with a bad drama or even laugh at your bad jokes. That's far more authentic and trustworthy than the woman who claims that she will never betray your trust and stay by your side forever," replied Khan as he looked at Cassandra. Both of them had matured with age and strength. But while looking at each other, their eyes reminded each other of that promise they made 5 years ago. Both Khan and Cassandra had waited for each other, staying true to their words while focusing on what they had to do. And now, the long and overdue reunion finally happened. It was right then. "Fa ha ha. Ha ha. You're so dramatic." "Those were very lame lines," spoke Cassandra as she picked up Khan, her smile brightening up the mood. "Well, I'm still very bad when it comes to flirting with women. And it's not like I had a reason to improve or someone to practice with," said Khan as he pulled Cassandra closer. "Oi, single losers. Give us some privacy," said Khan and used the world creation to seclude him and Cassandra from the rest of the world. "As for what they do for their reunion, it was left for your own imagination." Inside the ethereal realm shaped by the power of world creation, a breathtaking castle stood in its majesty. Vibrant colors painted its intricate architecture, and the surrounding landscape was a paradise of lush greenery, towering trees, and crystal-clear rivers that shimmered under the golden sunlight. It was a realm untouched by conflict, a sanctuary of peace amidst the chaos of their lives. At the highest floor of this magnificent castle, enclosed within a legendary rank isolation barrier, 2 figures lay together on a grand bed, their bodies entwined in a quiet embrace. Khan and Cassandra, half-naked beneath the silken sheets, lay against each other in tranquil intimacy. His muscular arms wrapped protectively around her, while she nestled against his chest, tracing idle patterns across his skin. The warmth of their bodies mingled in the soft glow of the ethereal light seeping through the windows, casting long shadows that danced across the room. "Smooch, explain it to me," she whispered, her tone teasing yet filled with genuine curiosity. She turned her head slightly, placing a soft kiss on his jawline before meeting his gaze. Khan exhaled deeply, his fingers gently caressing her exposed shoulder before he spoke. "From time to time, the feeling of longing I had for you kept growing." His golden eyes darkened with emotion. "I always wondered whether you were safe or not, whether I should return and take you with me. My mind was always filled with uncertainty. But I, too, was focused on too many things. So all I could do was let those emotions fester in my heart." He reached up and gently grasped Cassandra's chin between his fingers, tilting her face so their eyes met once more. His touch was both possessive and tender, as if he wanted to memorize every inch of her. Their breaths mingled, heavy and warm, as the tension between them grew. The longing, the yearning, the suppressed emotions, they all swirled together in the air around them. The golden light in the castle's chamber flickered, casting shadows that danced across the silk-draped bed, surrounding them in an aura of warmth and intimacy. Cassandra's lips parted slightly, her own breath becoming unsteady as she stared into Khan's eyes, which burned with intensity. The moments stretched between them, unspoken words carried in their gazes, their touches, their breaths, words that needed no voice, for in this embrace, everything had already been said. Their heavy, hot, and scandalous breaths collided with each other, as he spoke in a tone full of yearning for the most beautiful woman he had met in his life. "Cassandra Michelson, I want you to know one thing." He spoke in a serious but also romantic tone. "You're mine and only mine. You're not even allowed to think about someone else ever. Your affection, your fondness, and your sacred love, all of it should be focused only on me," said Khan. Cassandra, on the other side, chuckled lightly. My, what a possessive man I have." She spoke and nibbled on Khan's neck. "Hey, I'm not possessive or a controlling type. It's just that I love you so much that even the thought of you liking someone else terrifies me. You could say that I'm the hopeless romanticist type of man. Besides, if I didn't feel protective about you, means I never truly loved you to begin with," explained Khan as his hand reached towards a certain part, caressing and squeezing something gently. "Ah, hey, you're making me look bad. I too thought about you from time to time, you know? It's just that I had no way of knowing where you were all this time," said Cassandra as she also grabbed Khan's certain body part and squeezed it tightly. Smooch! Khan kissed Cassandra again, both passionately and intimately as their tongues played with each other's. "Cassandra, I want to love you. I want to be loved by you. I want to explore and experience all there is that comes with having a relationship with your better half. I want to go and see new places, eat different foods, see different sights, and create memories as we build a future together. And I want to form all those memories with you by my side, holding my hand with every step as those memories become an unforgettable part of my life," said Khan as he pushed Cassandra on the bed, retaking the initiative. His eager and voracious eyes seemed to be devouring Cassandra's naked beauty as Khan grasped her waist and pulled her closer. "Then show me how much you love me. Make me forget about all the worries in the outside world," spoke Cassandra, welcoming his approach. Her gaze was resolute as she felt the sincerity behind Khan's words. In a way, it made her feel drawn to Khan even more, knowing that the man she chose was rightfully obsessed with her, just as she was obsessed with him. All the wait for those 5 years seemed worth it with each passing moment. Khan and Cassandra embraced each other again. They had lost count of how many times they eloped with each other's bodies while sharing the most intimate yet also the happiest moment of their lives. Soon, the room and then the entire castle surrounded by the isolation barrier were filled with loud moans and grunting as indistinguishable objects of unknown origin started colliding with each other, very fast and impactfully. Outside the castle stood 3 people as guards. In this realm, there were no enemies but these 3 saints, one of whom was a 5th stage saint himself while the other 2 were 4th stage saints, looked bored out of their minds. Boom! Rumble! The entire castle behind them started shaking as the ground trembled as 2 powerful saints within the castle started their secret activity. "Ah, here they go again," spoke the male 4th stage saint. "How long has it been already ever since we arrived?" spoke the saint in the middle with a giant's word on his back. "It's been 10 days already, but Master slowed the flow of time so it should be only a day in the outside world," responded the 4th stage saint. "Oho, their reunion must be going to take time. Master and Lady Cassandra must have dearly missed each other. You oblivious idiots aren't going to understand a man and woman's love for each other," spoke the female saint, her feminine voice carrying a distinct charm of its own. "Shut up. Stop acting like you're any different from us. He created you just as he created us. Just because Lady Cassandra treats you favorably doesn't mean you're a real woman," responded the fifth stage saint. "Oh my, did I strike a nerve? No wonder you two couldn't make a woman fall for you," she spoke, dismissing her colleagues. "Who the hell said we want to?" objected both the saints. Meanwhile, within a sealed space, was the soul of Rathnar Whitlock. He had been cut off from the rest of the world ever since Khan brought Cassandra into this realm. Alone in the dark, he couldn't see or talk with anyone. Rathnar, with an exasperated and impatient tone, cursed loudly. "When the hell are these two going to stop?" The following day, Khan and Cassandra emerged from the secluded realm, accompanied by Khan's three most trusted subordinates. A palpable sense of resolve marked the transition from their private sanctuary back to the real world, as both carried the weight of their responsibilities and impending actions. To Khan's surprise, Cassandra had long been aware of his enigmatic subordinates, having discovered their existence years ago when she had first ascended to the rank of a second-stage saint. At that time, she had just begun meticulously orchestrating her plan for vengeance against those who had wronged her. Her ascent in power had granted her a greater understanding of the hidden forces at play within her clan, allowing her to uncover secrets that had been deliberately buried beneath layers of deception and political maneuvering. One such revelation was the true nature of an elder who had once been an influential figure in the clan, one of the many individuals who had been eager to trade Cassandra away in marriage for his own personal and political gains. This particular elder, despite being only a third-stage saint, had secured his position of power not through sheer strength but through his cunning, strategic mind, and manipulative tactics. His ability to navigate the treacherous waters of noble politics had earned him favor among the majority of the clan's ruling council. To him, the offspring of the clan were nothing more than bargaining chips, mere commodities to be exchanged in carefully arranged marriages that served the sole purpose of elevating his own standing. His influence within the Elder Council stemmed from his ability to negotiate and orchestrate unions that would bring wealth, alliances, and political leverage to the clan, transactions that ensured his name remained relevant and his status unchallenged. Should one of these arranged marriages yield prosperity, prestige, or financial gain, he would claim full credit for his strategic brilliance, further cementing his position of importance. However, if such unions led to misfortune, scandal, or conflict, he was equally adept at shifting the blame onto the very descendants he had coerced into these marriages. His rhetoric was calculated, painting the victims of his schemes as selfish individuals who had failed to make the necessary sacrifices for the betterment of their family and their clan. This elder's influence extended beyond mere matchmaking. He had cultivated relationships with like-minded individuals in other noble houses, forming an informal network of those who shared his ideology. Together, they facilitated and enforced political marriages that benefited the ruling elites while disregarding the well-being, happiness, or personal desires of those being wed. For them, marriage was never about love, compatibility, or mutual respect. It was a cold, transactional arrangement meant to strengthen bloodlines and secure power. The consequences of this practice were devastating. Many clan members, particularly the weaker or less influential, found themselves powerless to resist these arranged fates. Some, unable to endure a lifetime of suffering in loveless or abusive marriages, took the most tragic path, opting for death over a life of oppression. There were cases where young women, forced into unions with violent or sadistic husbands, had met cruel fates. Similarly, men who had been coerced into marrying women with scandalous pasts or destructive tendencies often found their lives ruined and their ambitions shattered. The practice of political marriage was not exclusive to Cassandra's clan. It was a widespread tradition embedded in the very foundation of nobility. Whether among royalty or the aristocracy, these unions were dictated by power, wealth, and strategic advantage, with little regard for the individuals involved. Those at the top viewed it as a necessary evil, a means to secure their dominion and influence, while those at the bottom bore the brunt of its inhumanity. When Cassandra found an opportunity to seclude and kill the elder, Her plans were thwarted by the sudden appearance of some of his allies within the clan who also shared his ambitions. But as she was already found, Cassandra had no choice but to fight them all together. But even with her strength and summoned deity, she eventually ran out of world energy as these people were seasoned veterans themselves. As her life was on the verge of imminent death, the subordinates hiding under her shadow finally showed up and assisted her in defeating all of them. Even though they were all but first-stage saints at that time, the power, skills, and unique abilities that should belong to multiple different fighting classes were tremendously helpful. After the battle, the subordinates gave her the core of the third-stage saint and kept the rest for their growth. It was after that incident that Cassandra learned about them being Khan's creation. First, she was surprised. However, the subordinates were prohibited from revealing his true identity back then. So all she could do was wait for Khan to return one day. Ever since that time, all three of them were her hidden allies as well as bodyguards that she often used during her strategies and even fights as she moved from one target to another. In just 5 years, Cassandra and the three subordinates had eliminated over 53 targets. But the Michelson clan had millions of members, and those who approved the trade-off back then were more than 100. Each time, they found a way to blame the circumstances of the disappearance of these members on external factors such as treason, some enemy clan targeting them, or even these people defecting for greater gains to other clans and then disappearing into thin air. And since she could perfectly hide her rank ever since Khan merged her soul with Cassandra, no one ever suspected her to be the main culprit. To the entire Michelson clan, Cassandra was still a second-stage saint, one of the most talented prospects of the clan, just like Veronica, her cousin who also rose to the same rank recently. But the humiliation and betrayal still ignited the flame of vengeance just the same even to this day. Killing Stronov Michelson, her uncle, and also one of the perpetrators could be considered as destroying one of the pillars of the clan. After his death was to become public, Cassandra had already planned to blame one of his lifelong nemesis who vied for his moniker as the #1 swordsman of Vantria. The trail of evidence would come from the way she used Hachiman to kill Stronov. They even orchestrated the said culprit's arrival in Rathna yesterday so people could connect the dots themselves. Everything was thoroughly planned by Cassandra, and the three subordinates had been very reliable for her, thanks to Khan. For the past 10 days in Khan's realm, that was equivalent to 1 day in Vantria. Other than their questionable activities, he told Cassandra about his real identity. Her reaction to this information was no different than that of Albestros and Sirius. Whether it was his previous life, his new identity, the responsibilities he shouldered since the day of his arrival in Vantria, Khan told her all the important things step by step. Each day, while professing his feelings, his worries, and the hardships he went through after leaving Rocco's empire, Khan chose not to hide anything. As time passed, Cassandra started appreciating his honesty even more. Knowing that the man she had committed herself to over all these years was indeed worthy of her love and respect. Was Khan perfect by any standards? No, he was not. All the personality traits and development he accumulated after leaving Vantria was something she couldn't judge either. It was around the 5th day that Khan told her the machinations of Martial Emperor aka the original Khan Salvatore. At that point, she couldn't help but wonder if all things Khan told her were nothing but lies. But after she saw him use the descent of the martial god skill, the one which had the martial emperor's visage manifesting over Khan, she came to believe everything. She also learned that, in the original timeline, Khan and Cassandra never met. The biggest but also obvious shock was that she had committed suicide. The fact that Khan was not by her side during that night changed her destiny entirely. Here I was, fighting for my own existence while you were fighting for the sake of everything that has ever existed. It makes my revenge against my clan seem incredibly petty. Spoke Cassandra with a sense of resignation. No, it was something you needed to do anyway. It defines who you are as a person. Some may say that vengeance is a path of destruction. But whilst they preach morality, they also fail to acknowledge that vengeance is also the path to salvation. Spoke Khan in a reassuring tone. Providence. Both you and I believe in providence. The difference is that, unlike others, we're not waiting for God to seek out justice on our behalf. Rather, we're choosing to be the enforcers of that justice ourselves," spoke Khan as he honestly related to Cassandra. It was right then that Cassandra had decided that she would no longer stay hidden and move beyond her small-scale revenge. She wouldn't forgive her clan or even her parents, but for now she needed to be by Khan's side. Because based on what the martial emperor told Khan, Cassandra was one of the only two people left in the world who had the deity summoner class. And if her involvement could billions of lives and help in saving the whole world of Vantria, then she would happily do it. Just like Khan, Cassandra too now had a higher purpose in her life. On the 9th day, Khan revealed the survival of the Abyss Empire and where he was headed, and how he now wished to become the emperor of the Rakos Empire, just like in the original timeline. Yet, many of those plans needed to be carefully orchestrated so that when the Great War actually began, they would be able to steer the direction of the war and save countless lives. Followed by another passionate day of love and intimacy, Khan and Cassandra had decided to join their fates together, never to be torn apart again. After introducing Cassandra to Vildred and Omega, Khan wasted no time. His plans unfolded rapidly, and he arrived at the capital branch of Seven Deadly Sins, the infamous underground organization he had meticulously built from the shadows. This was where the next crucial phase of his operation would begin, the systematic dismantling of the existing government structure, a move long in the making. Inside the hidden main headquarters of Seven Deadly Sins, Khan appeared before a figure known as Zeus. To the rest of the organization, Zeus was their enigmatic leader, a mastermind whose presence dictated the course of their operations. In truth, however, Zeus was nothing more than one of Khan's doppelgangers, a persona he had crafted in the early days to establish and maintain control over the organization while keeping his true identity hidden. With a simple touch, Khan merged with his doppelganger, regaining every memory, every decision, and every bit of intelligence that had been accumulated in Zeus's absence. The integration was seamless, and in an instant, Khan became privy to all recent developments within Seven Deadly Sins. This was where his expertise as a master-rank Saint Blacksmith, proficient in the art of artificing, played a critical role. Under the guise of Zeus, Khan had spent years amassing a vast network of resources, acquiring materials essential for the large-scale production of magical projection artifacts. These artifacts were designed to serve as a conduit for information dissemination, powerful tools that would allow him to manipulate public perception and expose the corruption embedded within the highest echelons of power. At the heart of this endeavor lay the extensive intelligence Seven Deadly Sins had gathered over the past 5 years. Their spies had infiltrated noble clans, government institutions, and major business conglomerates, meticulously compiling evidence of scams, illicit dealings, brutality, and money laundering orchestrated by the ruling elites. Every crime, every underhanded scheme, every atrocity committed by those in power had been documented and archived, waiting for the perfect moment to be unleashed. However, Khan knew from experience that simply revealing the truth was not enough. 5 years ago, he had leveraged similar tactics to reshape the political landscape of Verlassen fiefdom. But this time, the stakes were higher, and he needed a more sophisticated approach. His goal was not merely to expose corruption but to orchestrate a complete upheaval, one that would leave no room for recovery for those he sought to dethrone. As he worked tirelessly, creating thousands of projection artifacts within mere minutes, Cassandra and Vildred joined in to ensure that every piece of information was transcribed accurately. Given their own formidable ranks, Cassandra as a summoner and Vildred as a sage, they were able to keep up with Khan's blistering pace, each of them lending their unique abilities to accelerate the production process. By the end of the day, their combined efforts had yielded more than 100 million artifacts, each imbued with undeniable proof of the government's wrongdoings. These artifacts would serve as the ultimate weapon, an unstoppable wave of truth that would shake the very foundation of the empire. Cassandra furrowed her brows, clearly intrigued yet skeptical. "Babe, how exactly do you plan to distribute these across the entire empire? The government is bound to crack down on an unverified product flooding the market, especially one capable of spreading uncontrolled information," she asked, her voice laced with concern. Khan, however, simply smirked, a devilish, knowing grin forming on his face. He reached into his storage and pulled out a freshly crafted artifact, a sleek rectangular device with a glass screen and small buttons on its surface. In my world, we call this a mobile phone, Khan began, holding up the artifact for them to see. It's a communication device that became a necessity for nearly every working-class person. Not only did it revolutionize the way people connected, but it was also used for entertainment, information sharing, and even marketing. Entire industries were built around it. Cassandra and Vildred leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Unlike the expensive communication artifacts currently used by nobles and the military, which have limited options and require direct mana input from those who can use it or have the resources to do so, this device can record voices, send messages, and even transmit broadcasts from officially recognized networks. Khan explained, "My plan is to introduce it as a groundbreaking new invention and distribute it for free under the guise of sending out samples." Giving it away? Are you insane? With a product like that, you could amass a fortune in no time, especially if it can be mass-produced at a fraction of the cost of traditional communication artifacts. Spoke Vildred as he raised a skeptical brow. True, but wealth is not my priority right now. The real value of this device lies in what it can do in the short term. He held the device up, rolling it between his fingers. These phones I created have a crucial flaw. Their battery life is limited to just 1 week, and they can't be recharged using mana stones or any other conventional means. They will stop working after 7 days. He explained casually. But that's all the time we need, iterated Khan with a smug smile. Cassandra frowned slightly, deep in thought. Then just 100 million units won't be enough, she remarked. Khan, however, shook his head with a knowing smirk. No, they will be. We're not trying to set up a business here, he clarified. We won't be applying for any patents or opening a production line for this, at least not now. The goal isn't profit, it's influence, clarified Khan. Cassandra and Vildred exchanged glances as Khan continued. What we want is for people to get their hands on these devices. Once they do, word of mouth will spread like wildfire. Since it's a brand new product, those who get it first will naturally show it off, demonstrating what it can do to their families, friends, and colleagues. The urge to flaunt something innovative is universal. Vildred nodded in understanding, a smirk forming on his lips. And once enough people start using it, curiosity will drive demand. Exactly, Khan affirmed. But more importantly, our primary target audience is the people in the capital, the very heart of the empire where all major government institutions, including Parliament, are located. If we want to shake the foundation of the ruling structure, that's where we must start. Cassandra leaned forward. So the first 6 days, what happens then? For the first 6 days, people will go nuts over these devices, Khan explained. They'll quickly realize how they transform their daily lives, providing instant communication, easy access to information, and a level of convenience they've never had before. They'll also start investigating where these devices come from. That's where we misdirect them. He iterated with an insidious tone. Vildred arched a brow again. Misdirect? Yes, we'll label the devices under existing companies, not our own. This way, even if the authorities start digging, they'll be chasing ghosts. The entire business world will be in chaos, trying to figure out who is behind this groundbreaking technology. Nobles, merchants, and scholars alike will be scrambling to get a piece of it, all while we stay in the shadows. He explained with a cordial smile. Cassandra's eyes gleamed with realization. This will cause a ripple effect beyond just the common folk. Once the nobles and merchants see the potential of these devices, they'll start fighting over control of the technology, further dividing the ruling factions. And on the 7th day we strike. She spoke with surprise. Exactly, Khan confirmed. On the final day, before the batteries run out, we unleash our trump card. Every single device will begin broadcasting the truth, the corruption, the crimes, and the conspiracies we've gathered over the years. With 100 million people watching at once, no noble, no ruler, no military force will be able to suppress it in time. The empire itself will be paralyzed with shock before they even figure out how to respond. He elaborated. Vildred let out a low whistle, crossing his arms. It will work. That's so smart, he admitted, utterly baffled by Khan's sheer cunning. Cassandra smirked, shaking her head. You really do love playing the long game, don't you? Why fight a war with swords and blood, when I can burn an empire down with whispers and light? Said Khan as he chuckled. A clever gambit. Instead of hoarding power, you're using it as a Trojan horse to destabilize the very system you're targeting. Spoke the former Lightning Dragon Emperor, using people's basic needs as a means to infiltrate the entire population's minds. Cassandra nodded, a glint of admiration in her eyes. And that, my dear, is how you collapse an empire from within, without ever lifting a blade. He iterated with a grin. That's expected of my darling. Such a genius, said Cassandra as she hugged Khan. Ah, you're embarrassing me, honey, spoke Khan as he hugged back and kissed Cassandra on the forehead. Both of them started being lovey-dovey all of a sudden. Vildred's face turned ashen as he grabbed his scepter with both hands. His eyes filled with wrath. Whoosh! Omega quickly grabbed him from behind, pulling the sage away. Let me go. I'm going to kill these bastards. As the sun rose over the Rocco's empire, the wheels of Khan's grand scheme were finally set into motion. The capital, along with several major cities, awoke to what seemed like an ordinary day. Workers rushing to their jobs, merchants preparing for business, and transportation hubs bustling with the usual traffic. However, amidst the mundane rhythm of daily life, an unfamiliar phenomenon began to unfold. Across magic train stations, flying buses, cargo ships, and market routes, a wave of well-dressed merchants and representatives flooded the streets, handing out sleek, compact devices to curious passers-by. Their polished attire and confident demeanor suggested they were professionals representing a major corporation, one that had seemingly emerged overnight to introduce a revolutionary product. The name of the device? Whisper. Marketed as the dawn of a new era in communication, Whisper was presented as the next breakthrough in magical technology, supposedly developed by newly rising communication industry giants. The distributors claimed that the devices were being offered as free samples, an exclusive trial run meant to gauge public reception before launching large-scale production. There were no strings attached, no sign-ups required, and no hidden fees, just a simple, effortless distribution of what appeared to be an innovation that would change lives. And change lives it did. Unlike the expensive and restrictive communication artifacts used by nobles and government officials, Whisper allowed everyday citizens to send one-minute voice messages to designated devices of similar function, making instant, personal communication available to the masses for the first time. But what truly captivated the people was the fact that Whisper was completely free. It ran on mana stones, yet did not require costly refueling or registration with a noble house or military authority. This meant that even the poorest of workers and merchants, those who previously had no access to any form of long-distance communication, could now send messages across cities and provinces without spending a single coin. And, as Khan had anticipated, whether on Earth or in Vantria, people loved free things. Curiosity turned into excitement. Families, friends, and colleagues eagerly tested their new devices, their eyes lighting up with wonder as they heard distant voices transmitted through the small glass screens. The working class, long deprived of such privileges, found themselves enjoying something that had previously been reserved for the elite. But Whisper's appeal didn't stop there. Much like Earth's radio systems, the device came equipped with music channels and information networks, allowing users to listen to news, entertainment, and even curated broadcasts on the go, without needing a large, expensive artifact or a bulky projection screen. Those who especially enjoyed music or wanted to be updated with the current happenings of the Empire as a means to pass the time found this lucrative. For a normal person, the ease of access to such devices was limited, and although their economy also worked on mana cores and ores, Not every person was some miner or a rich noble to have an abundance of them at their disposal. Hence, a lot of people accepted the device just for wanting to own something precious for themselves. What they didn't know was that Khan had engineered and added runes to these devices which basically hacked the government-approved networks and these broadcast stations without permission. And since the product was launched under different reputable brands and organizations' names and logos, no one thought of it as a suspicious or illegal device. Plus, all the people distributing these devices were mostly spies of the 7 deadly sins who knew how to blend into the crowd perfectly. They avoided areas where law enforcement patrolled the premises and moved to another location every single hour, making them hard to track. And just as Khan expected, all the 100 million units were released in the population in just 24 hours. On the second day, people started using it for the fun of it, making calls to their friends, relatives, and colleagues and using them to conduct business with clients too. And surprisingly, it worked. Because Whisper had no restriction on time you could talk or one needed to pay a hefty fee just to send a message via communication artifacts. Those who used it for other features found it even more amazing because they could hear a variety of music, news, and even holographic broadcasts on the small screen on the device. For normal citizens, it was indeed a revolutionary product that had incredible use. So the general populace quickly spread the information about this product to those who didn't have it. By the third day, all the major corporations and government institutions heard about Whisper as it became national news. Everyone was trying to get their own hands on the samples, but the people who distributed them were nowhere to be seen. What? This thing has our company logo and trademark on it. How come I've never even heard of this product? Shouted one of the CEOs of a nationwide popular communication device manufacturing company. On the surface, Whisper looked like an authentic brand made by their company and the quality of the material itself was top-notch. Even he doubted his eyes and wondered whether it was a counterfeit or a genuine product launched by them. Find who distributed these into the market, and try to get as many samples as we can. If we can sell it, we will be swimming in billions of dramas, said the CEO as he ordered his underlings. A similar scenario occurred in all the major companies whose names and logos were being used for Whisper. The only distinct fact among the products was their color and logos, which made them look authentic to the masses and hence, no one even bothered to check since it was a free product. As for those whose business took a hit from this, filed complaints to authorities and got the government involved. And, true to form, the government, ever intent on controlling information and hoarding any technological advancements that might empower the masses, moved swiftly to reclaim the Whisper devices. They feared that this unprecedented breakthrough in communication, now flooding every street and marketplace, could upend the established order. In a series of forceful maneuvers, government operatives began rounding up citizens, confiscating these devices with little regard for the inconvenience or panic it caused. In a sterile government inspection room, an analyst studied one of the confiscated Whisper samples with intense scrutiny. The glass screen glowed softly under his expert gaze as he traced the delicate runes etched along its surface. The runes on these devices are of the highest tier, he remarked thoughtfully. But they aren't exclusive to our empire. I can see elven and dwarven runes intermingled with our own. Many of the other markings are so unique, they're indistinguishable even to an expert like me. A government officer, standing nearby with a furrowed brow and a clipboard in hand, pressed for more details. So, how does it actually work? He asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and authoritative command. The analyst leaned forward, his voice measured as he explained, somehow, this device can mimic the functions of a full-sized artifact of its kind, yet it's incredibly small. The mana cores inside operate much like batteries, powering not only voice transmissions but also other forms of magical communication. To reduce the size and still maintain all these functionalities, whoever engineered Whisper must be a true visionary, a genius beyond our current understanding. What the expert didn't know was the person he was calling a genius visionary was a habitual copyrights violator. As the days passed, the effect of Whisper on the populace became impossible to ignore. On the fourth day, what began as a simple distribution of free samples quickly transformed into a burgeoning trend. People began to proudly display their whisper devices, using them to connect calls, play music, and broadcast messages, a modern marvel that captured the collective imagination. Local stores, restaurants, and even workplaces buzzed with excitement as the fad of whisper spread like wildfire across the empire. Its sleek design and versatile capabilities made it a status symbol among those who possessed it. And while the government scrambled to control it, the allure of whisper only grew stronger, setting the stage for a conflict between the old order and the new dawn of free, unfettered connectivity. But since not everyone could get their hands on the device, it became a premium and exclusive product that only the selective individuals had. A product given for free just for beta testing or a demo was not being treated as a luxury by the common folks. On the fifth day, the whole empire had heard about Whisper and how dramatically it changed the entire communication industry and its application due to its small size and portability in daily life. And because it was launched under the name of multiple reputed companies and brands, the market cap of these said organizations rose by a huge margin because people with greed saw immense potential and started investing money in them to buy their stock. It was no different than how artificial intelligence was overly praised and the market absurdly inflated the production cost of such projects and apps due to exclusivity on Earth. In reality, it was just a cheap and mass-produced product that stole data from other sources and acted like it revolutionized the world's technology. On the sixth day, however, the craze for Whisper reached its peak while the government tried to pressure these companies to give them information about how this product was made. But all these companies could do was shut their mouths because of the tremendous wealth they were receiving without even doing any innovative work. The tech bubble was now at its peak, similar to how people saw AI and cryptocurrency on Earth, acting as if it was absolute and irreplaceable. With only the possibility of growing even further and reshaping the entire civilization's future once it became accessible to the general public in the market. Because in the end, the product was only bad if it had bad pricing. If it was reasonably priced, then it would sell like hotcakes. And while the empire's economy, government, and all parts of society were being incredibly affected by Whisper's meteoric rise, came the day when the bubble burst, the beginning of the crisis that would shape the future of the Rocco's empire. During the bustling working hours at noon, life in the Rocco's empire continued its steady, familiar rhythm. Citizens moved about their daily routines, workers hustling to their jobs, merchants busy with their stalls, and officials attending to their bureaucratic duties, unaware that the course of their lives was about to be irrevocably changed. By this time, Whisper had become a household name. Every person across the empire had heard the whispered legend of the revolutionary device at least once. Its sudden appearance had thrown both the government and telecommunication corporations into a frenzy. The authorities desperately searched for the origin of this life-changing technology, while established telecom giants scrambled to reverse engineer it and claim their own legitimacy. Despite all their efforts, however, neither side could uncover its true source or replicate its magic. As the common folk continued their day, absorbed in their work and conversation, a sudden, jarring sound cut through the hum of daily life. Beep! Every Whisper device emitted a loud beep at once. In a matter of moments, a clear, authoritative voice resonated across the empire through the devices. The emergency announcement was impossible to ignore. Emergency announcement. All citizens of the Rocco's empire must hear this. Please gather around and listen to this emergency broadcast. Within seconds, people in workplaces, marketplaces, and on the streets scrambled to pull out their Whisper devices. Ding! A notification sound echoed as a sudden holographic projection burst forth from the main screen. What had once been confined to two-dimensional displays now leaped into vivid, three-dimensional life, captivating the attention of every onlooker. The crowds, stirred by the call for an emergency gathering, abandoned their tasks. From factories to open markets, thousands of citizens began converging in public spaces, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Every ear strained to catch the words of the broadcast, the urgency of the message reverberating through the very air. The holographic projection continued, its image steady as a lifeless, disembodied voice narrated the message. The holographic projection continued, its image steady as a lifeless, disembodied voice narrated the message. The following announcement concerns the lives of all citizens, so please hear it carefully. We are now going to expose criminals and traitors of the empire, those who have been committing scams, frauds, felonies, corruption, and even atrocities such as coercion and murder. The voice, eerily devoid of any warmth, was unmistakably modeled after Khan's own system, cold, precise, and unyielding. A relentless stream of revelations poured through the whisper devices, each message more damning than the last. The first transmission cut through the air like a clarion call. Subject 1. This person works in the municipal office of District 1 of Capital Rathna. His crimes include taking bribes to allow illegal construction and siphoning taxpayer money to fund his indulgences in nightclubs and prostitution establishments. Immediately, the device began listing details: name, age, physical description, the precise position he held within the municipal office, and offered undeniable proof. Documents flashed across screens, followed by photos and video recordings that meticulously chronicled his misdeeds. Every piece of evidence was irrefutable, leaving no room for doubt. Within minutes, similar broadcasts began cascading in from every district. Citizens in District 2, District 3, and beyond received transmissions implicating local officials, starting with low-level clerks and mid-tier administrators. As the hours passed, the scope of the broadcast expanded dramatically. The list of targets swelled from minor municipal workers to the heads of associations and entire government departments. The narrative soon shifted to the realm of business. Whisper exposed CEOs of pharmaceutical companies, contractors, and other corporate executives who had conspired to manipulate tender processes and secure lucrative contracts through bribery. The evidence was staggering. Each holographic report was replete with detailed financial records, screenshots of covert meetings, and even audio clips of whispered transactions. Then came the most explosive part of the broadcast. Major political leaders, the elected mayors, magistrates, and heads of critical public institutions such as the Department of Justice, the police force, the fire department, and even healthcare facilities, found themselves under the unforgiving spotlight. Whisper transmitted their names and positions, along with video footage of clandestine meetings and documents that tied them to networks of corruption. The narrative left no stone unturned. It wasn't just a few bad apples. Corruption had infiltrated every echelon of power. Across the Rocco's empire, the effect was immediate and visceral. People gathered in public squares, workplaces, and even on the streets, their eyes glued to the glowing screens of their whisper devices. They stood rooted in shock as each new piece of evidence was revealed. Ordinary citizens, farmers, clerks, shopkeepers, who had once trudged through their daily routines were now forced to confront the stark reality of systemic corruption. The evidence was so overwhelming that even a 10-year-old child could grasp its meaning, let alone the seasoned citizens who had struggled for years under the oppressive weight of the corrupt regime. As the broadcasts continued, an undeniable truth emerged. Not only were government officials complicit in these crimes, but those sworn to uphold the law were also in league with the criminal networks. The very institutions that were meant to stop such corruption had instead become extensions of the corrupt power structure. The revelation was a public awakening, a collective moment when the people saw, in stark detail, how the empire had been run not for their benefit, but for the enrichment of a select few. There was enough evidence to convince even a 10-year-old kid, let alone all the mature people who had seen the outside world and had been struggling to make ends meet. The entire broadcast lasted for 3 hours, exposing everyone in those selected regions. No one knew how such detailed analysis could be reported via a small device that no one had even heard of just a week ago. The broadcast lasted for 3 continuous hours, a relentless cascade of revelations that shook the very foundation of the Rocco's empire. For an entire afternoon, every whisper device, a mere novelty just a week ago, became the conduit for exposing an empire's darkest secrets. Across bustling marketplaces, busy public squares, and quiet offices, citizens watched in astonishment as holographic projections lit up their devices. Live footage, crisp photos, and damning videos revealed a litany of scams and corruption that spanned every level of society. One screen showed how taxpayer money was squandered on bizarre experiments. Animals were being forced to ingest a certain fruit, with the results meticulously documented to determine if it made the said animal horny. In another, research projects were laid bare, exposing how officials studied the psychological impact of calling people by the wrong pronoun or gender, studies that were as invasive as they were absurd. There were even recordings of eccentric inventors trying to force the impossible. The rectangular-shaped wheel, they claimed, would make vehicles faster. Each report was more outlandish than the last, yet all were backed by incontrovertible evidence. The holographic broadcasts did not discriminate. Whether it was a rundown restaurant, a once-respected public institution, or a major manufacturing company, every establishment had its share of corruption and fraud revealed in excruciating detail. High-ranking government officials, influential business leaders, and even industrial tycoons, those whose faces were once symbols of authority, were unmasked before the eyes of the public. Every culprit's name, age, appearance, and position was shown alongside documented proof of their misdeeds. Bribes, embezzlements, fraudulent contracts, and other underhanded dealings that violated every conceivable law of the land. The public reaction was instantaneous and visceral. People across the empire, many of whom had cast their votes for these very individuals, felt betrayed. Crowds in city centers stopped dead in their tracks, eyes glued to the flashing images and live videos streaming on their Whisper devices. Shock mingled with outrage, and soon, whispers of rebellion began to ripple through every neighborhood. Amid the chaos, questions arose. How could a small device, barely known until recently, report such detailed, damning information? The answer lay in the long-forgotten shadows of Khan's past. Years ago, before Khan had set his grand plans in motion, he had entrusted Tobias with a legion of over 20,000 subordinates, semi-saints drawn from the ranks of assassins and rogues who possessed the rare shadow merge ability. Their mission had been clear: to silently document every crime, every scandal, every underhanded deal, leaving behind a digital trail of evidence. Those subordinates infiltrated even the shadows of the government officials and business tycoons and made copies of all the evidence against them so that Tobias could blackmail them if needed. This wasn't the result of a mood swing, but rather thorough planning that was set into motion and had been under works for the past 5 years. And now that Khan had set his eyes on being the sole ruler of the empire, it played a crucial role in the first steps of his plans. With a voice that resonated like a prophetic oracle, Whisper delivered its final, shattering broadcast to the citizens of the Rocco's empire. The holographic images and live footage had already rocked the very foundations of society, exposing endless layers of corruption and deceit. However, this wouldn't be Khan's usual style of ending things. Not unless they ended with a blood-boiling speech. As the whole empire witnessed that their lives were treated like playthings and all the notions they had towards the society were nothing but lies, the rage within their entire being rose to peak. Whisper had shown a lot more than they had ever imagined. Now, as the words echoed across every Whisper device, the message was unmistakable, a cruel truth designed to tear down every illusion of fairness and hope that the people had clung to for so long. And finally, the speech written by Khan began, presented as the farewell words by Whisper. With this announcement, we're being forced to shut down forever because the government doesn't want us to reveal the truth. The message began, its tone bitter and accusatory. That you, people of the Rocco's empire, do not matter. Your right to vote is just an illusion because, regardless of who you vote for, it's always these people from big clans, noble factions, and wealthy backgrounds who fill all the important positions in the government. The hardworking masses, those like you, are left with nothing more than a clerk's job at best or a foot soldier's position in a garrison at most. That was the opening statement, enough to rile up anyone listening at any corner of the Rocco's empire. The broadcast continued unabated, the words now painting a grim picture of the empire's social fabric. In a society where 80% of the population can't even wield magic, the remaining 20% rule over you as if it were their birthright. They give you the false hope of true freedom, indoctrinating you to be law-abiding citizens, all while you're led to vote for these corrupt elites in the belief that they will turn your life around and secure a better future for you and your children. Declared Whisper. The tone grew even more scathing as Whisper recounted a time long past. Even the previous monarchy had far more rights and laws dedicated to the safety and fair treatment of the citizens, laws that reigned for over a millennium under imperial rule. But now all we have is a dream that can never come true. The message reverberated through the devices and then, beep, the broadcast halted abruptly. The deafening beep echoed in the minds of every citizen who had listened, its sound searing into their collective consciousness. The majority of the citizens were left utterly bewildered by the revelation. It was almost unfathomable to them that the very individuals they had trusted enough to vote for were, in reality, no different from ruthless predators who had come to ruin their lives. These were the same people who, under the guise of legality, committed crimes and engaged in theft, all while cloaked in the authority of their positions. Meanwhile, the rest of the population shed blood and tears every day, struggling tirelessly just to earn an honest living and maintain a shred of dignity in a society that seemed designed to exploit them. What was meant to be a system that would promote societal advancement, create a better future for their children, and ensure safety and prosperity for all, had instead become a tool for the wealthy and well-connected. The funds that should have been used to uplift the community, invested in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and public safety, were instead diverted into the pockets of those who already had an abundance of resources. These elites, coming from privileged backgrounds or benefiting from influential support networks, continued to rise in rank, leaving the common folk to struggle just to survive and eke out a life of modest pride. In the eyes of the people, the promise of freedom had become a cruel illusion. They began to question the very purpose of a system that was supposed to work for them, only to find that it had morphed into their greatest enemy, an oppressor that allowed the corrupt to thrive while the honest, hard-working masses were left to bear the brunt of neglect and exploitation. How was this any different from a monarchy or dictatorship? But would exposing the corrupt system really change anything? The answer, bitter and inevitable, was no. At the end of the day, the system that governed people always had the means to bury, distort, or even dismantle the truth, could easily twist the narrative, declaring the exposé a fabrication, a devious plot by enemies of the state, and then suppress the matter in the name of national security. Every element of society, the corrupt politicians, government officials, lawmakers such as judges and lawyers, the police force, and even the economic market, was cut from the same rotted cloth. In this grim reality, the rights and voices of an ordinary person were rendered meaningless the moment those corrupt and powerful assumed authority. Moreover, this was a world where beings known as saints existed, mortals who were practically revered as gods by those who lacked power. Many of these saints were complicit in the corrupt system, enjoying privileges and influence that further entrenched the status quo. Even if the entire empire were to rise in protest against them, what could the powerless achieve against a system so deeply interwoven with divine or near-divine authority? The harsh truth was that the world wouldn't change simply because the truth had been exposed. The revelation of corruption, as staggering as it was, could not rewrite the realities of daily life. In the end, all the hardworking people would have no choice but to return to their jobs, to struggle day after day just to feed their families. Who, amid the grind of survival, had the time or energy to organize meaningful protests or marches? Even the opposition parties, the ones who claimed to fight for change, were inextricably linked to the very scams and illegal trades they publicly decried. Both sides, in a twisted dance of power, had a stake in the nefarious deals that enriched them. So there wasn't even a single person who they could rely on. There was no powerful entity who would fight them. There wasn't a single person in the Rocco's empire who could give them hope. Just like that, another week passed. Despite the explosive broadcast and the overwhelming truth laid bare by Whisper, the everyday grind of life in the Rocco's empire trudged on. Only now it was tinged with bitter disillusionment. Protests did break out as the people, fueled by anger and despair, took to the streets in a desperate bid for justice. However, as soon as the saints and semi-saints appeared, armed with their overwhelming power and the backing of the corrupt regime, the fervor of the demonstrators was swiftly extinguished. In a matter of moments, protesters were rounded up, captured, and thrown into jail, their voices silenced by the brutal efficiency of the system. In the wake of the unrest, only a handful of low-level officials chose to resign, their departures a feeble gesture against an institution that had long been a farce. The court of law, a joke even by Earth standards, played its part in this macabre theater. It held trials, forced appearances, and prosecuted a few minor offenders as if such actions could somehow restore balance or justice. Amidst the subdued murmurs of those who had gathered in public squares and humble meeting spots across the empire, conversations were held in hushed, defeated tones. In one cramped settlement, an elderly demonkin, bald and lined with the weariness of many years, spoke up in a voice heavy with bitterness. What's even the point of being a lawful citizen and paying taxes to these bastards who just fill their own pockets with our money? I mean, if you take out the importance of the military, what use is there for the government anyway? My house isn't being renovated, and the streets aren't getting cleaner or better paved than before. Inflation has tripled in the past 10 years, yet the average salary hasn't even increased by 20%. Do we even have any hope for better lives now? Across the table, a gray wolfkin, its fur mottled with the shades of defeat, leaned in and hissed softly, "SH, don't be so pessimistic. It's not as if things turned bad just after that whisper broadcast. They've always been like this. No matter who we choose as our next leader, they'll be no different from these corrupt bastards." Bang! Before the conversation could settle, a sudden bang noise shattered the low murmur of resigned discussion. In the same settlement, a young snakekin, barely in his mid-20s and eyes burning with fury, slammed his fist onto the table. "Damn it! I can't tolerate this anymore. All my life, I was shown a dream that if I studied hard and became a good person, I could get a decent job and live an honorable life. I prepared for competitive exams for the past 5 years, and you're telling me that the whole system was rigged from the very beginning?" The outburst drew a moment of stunned silence before an elderly elf, whose weathered features spoke of decades of hardship and struggle, sighed deeply and replied in a voice tinged with resigned sorrow. "Easy there, youngling. We all harbor our own contempt towards this government. But what can we, the weak and the poor, do? We're too insignificant, too powerless to stand up and fight for our rights in this world. There is no hope for commoners like us." And so, amid the fractured hopes and muted despair of the common people, the reality of the Rocco's empire set in. At least when the royal family was still in charge back then, I remember that they controlled the empire with an iron fist. I never felt that all my struggles and efforts were without result. Since they were overthrown 100 years ago, life hasn't been the same, said the elderly elf, his voice heavy with a mix of nostalgia and resignation. It was very strict, but it at least upheld the law and didn't show any mercy to corrupt bastards like these. His words resonated deeply with many who had lived long enough to witness the stark differences between the eras. Across the empire, individuals of various species, those who had experienced the old regime, gathered in quiet clusters, sharing their own recollections and experiences. They spoke of a time when, despite the oppressive nature of rule, there was at least a semblance of fairness in the system. Under the royal family's rule, positions of power were reserved for a class, yes, but those positions were not entirely monopolized by birthright. There was a fighting chance for commoners to amass wealth, achieve valor, and rise within the business world, government, and even the military based on their personal achievements. In hushed tones, they recalled the Whitlock imperial family, once deposed and now vilified by the history books following the revolution. Despite the propaganda that painted them as villains, many remembered that the Whitlocks had governed with a degree of fairness and justice that allowed even the lowliest subjects a chance to better their lives. For those who had lived under that rule, the memory of having a fair chance, however imperfect, was a sharp contrast to the current state of affairs. The sentiment spread like wildfire among the people. In every corner of the empire, a growing anger simmered beneath the surface, a rage that only seemed to intensify with each passing day. Yet the government, desperate to maintain control, had countered this rising discontent with a narrative of its own. They declared that Whisper, the device that had so brutally exposed corruption, was nothing more than a spy tool, a device engineered to invade the minds of the netizens and foment civil war. With such claims, the government managed to shield its officials and cronies from legitimate prosecution. As a result, the courts across the empire found themselves powerless to act decisively. They either dismissed the cases or dragged them out interminably, leaving the culprits largely unpunished. Even the media, once hailed as the truthful spokesperson for the people, shifted its tone abruptly. The once fiery and impassioned reports on corruption turned skeptical and dismissive, with headlines questioning the validity of the holographic transmissions and branding them as elaborate forgeries. People knew all too well that this was exactly the outcome that had been predicted. The system was designed to absorb shock and discredit any uprising of truth. No matter how damning the evidence, the machinery of power was adept at deflecting blame and twisting narratives. For the common citizen, those who had once dared to hope for a better future, this was a bitter pill to swallow. They had been promised freedom and fairness, yet they were left with a rigged system where even their protest against corruption was stifled by a judiciary that bowed to the interests of the powerful. Discussions carried a tone of despair in the shadowed corners of taverns and at the worn tables of community gatherings. What's the point of being a lawful citizen and paying taxes when our money only fills the pockets of these corrupt elites? Someone would ask quietly. Others lamented that despite the promises of progress and security, their neighborhoods remained run down, their wages stagnant, and their futures uncertain. Thus, as the world of the Rocco's empire grappled with the aftershocks of the Whisper broadcast, it became painfully clear that the entrenched powers had no intention of relinquishing control. The broadcast had ignited a spark of truth among the people, but that spark was now being smothered by a system adept at using fear, deception, and half-truths to maintain its dominion. And what could they possibly do? Go to war? With what funding, what power? The common people realized that even a first-stage saint could, through sheer saint pressure alone, take the lives of millions. No matter how righteous one might be, no one wanted to perish in a meaningless death, especially when the weight of the entire empire's corruption pressed down like a death sentence. As the week wore on, a grim resignation settled over the populace. They began to accept, with a heavy heart, that their fate was hopelessly sealed by a system designed to crush any hope of meaningful change. The protest fires had long since been doused by the relentless might of the saints and their enforcers, and the people were left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat and despair. Then, as whispers turned to hushed conversations in darkened corners and crowded marketplaces, a new rumor began to spread across the entire Rocco's empire. A big truth was finally revealed to the masses. The truth about why Consalvatore was murdered. Just when the people of Rocco's empire had barely managed to accept their helpless fate against the unfair system that governed them in the name of democracy, out of nowhere, a rumor started circulating within the masses. The government could subdue people's protests and marches with the power of saints, but they could not stop them from talking. There simply wasn't enough of a workforce to mandate what people spoke when they gathered together, since it was still assumed to be a free nation. And if they applied any more force than before, that would mean national instability, as people would burn down the government institutions and stop supporting any law authority altogether if forced to the edge. Because both the government and the business market needed people. Without them, the first two entities had nothing. And yet, amidst the barely snubbed flames of seething rage, the new rumor shook the entire population to their core. It all started from spies of the 7 deadly sins who previously did a marvelous job at spreading whisper among the population. Their target was local farmers, food vendors, cafes, and shop owners, which spread to bars and restaurants, eventually reaching the ears of all noble clans and government authorities. The said truth made people even angrier because their already despaired minds felt like even the sliver of hope they could have had in these dark times was killed by all these powerful people within the government and noble factions. The rumor mentioned the name of Khan Salvator, the genius and magnanimous sovereign of Verlassen fiefdom. 5 years ago, this young man not only made his name known to the whole Rakos Empire by winning the Emperor's Chosen competition that was held once 50 years, but his meteoric rise and rule within just a year after he returned to his homeland and overthrew the corrupt authorities there to make people's lives comfortable. He stopped the monster tides that have been haunting the population of Verlassen fiefdom for the past 100 years. The talented and promising young man had even killed legendary rank monsters and saved millions of lives ever since he took over. Everyone was fully aware of his existence back then because of his final declaration before his death that blamed the noble factions as the orchestrators of his death. Back then, many nobles in government, the military, and even the Justice Department were forced to step down from their positions after the monumental social reform, as people had collectively abandoned and shunned these classes for causing his death, just so they could take control of Verlassen fiefdom to loot its resources. Back then, many nobles in government, the military, and even the Justice Department were forced to step down from their positions after the monumental social reform, as people had collectively abandoned and shunned these classes for causing his death, just so they could take control of Verlassen fiefdom to loot its resources. They ignored that part of the Rakos Empire for centuries, but as soon as he solved all the problems, they had killed him covertly. But as if predicting his predetermined demise, Khan Salvator had left a recording to expose them as a failsafe so they couldn't have the last laugh. And as his final command, he abolished the sovereign system for the fiefdom and turned it into a democratic land. And people had turned out nothing but far more prosperous after they elected an entirely new regime led by a man named Tobias, rumored to be a close friend of the late Khan Salvator. Even to this day, many people envied the prosperity of Verlassen and how fulfilling lives the citizens of the fiefdom now lived compared to their own. The name Khan Salvator was synonymous with salvation in the eyes of citizens of the Rakos Empire. A man born in the bloodshed within his motherland returned to change the fate of his people and even succeeded in doing so. But unfortunately, meeting his demise at the hands of those who coveted his motherland. Khan's death had the same impact as that left by Whisper. However, the new rumor broke the last straw people held, and now, it showed them the grim reality of the system that they already had lost trust in. The rumor went on like this, that over 6 years ago, when Khan Salvator was living as a mere mercenary on the southern border of the empire close to the notorious Abyss Forest, in a place called the Flavit City, he found a secret that could have changed the entire fate of the Rakos Empire. During his time there, he found a remnant soul belonging to none other than the first sage of Rakos Empire, Lesrin Michelson. Even to this day, he was known as one of the founding members of the Rakos Empire along with the first emperor, Rathnar Whitlock, who later gained the moniker of the last peak saint of Vantria. Khan Salvator had undergone a trial held by Lesrin Michelson's remnant soul, whose purpose was to find a rightful successor with loyalty and unquestionable devotion to the people of the Rakos Empire, so he could become the next emperor. Khan Salvator had not only passed the trial with flying colors, as he was already dedicated to his mission to save his motherland, the Verlassen freedom, but now he swore to rid the empire of the plague called the government solely run by the nobles, turning the people of the nation into mere livestock. Passing the trial granted him knowledge and abilities to increase his strength and talent rapidly, a reward given to him by the first sage, Lesrin Michelson. It evidently helped Khan Salvator win the Emperor's Chosen and change the fate of his motherland when the government had abandoned its people for over a century after the uprising and extinction of imperial rule. Yet, after Khan Salvator fixed all the issues and was about to become a first-stage saint, all these noble factions got the wind of his true nature, that he was the rightful heir and the leader of the Rakos Empire, approved by the founding fathers as a person destined to bring true freedom and fairness to the people of this nation. Yet the hope he could have brought to people and offer them truly meaningful lives where they had a chance to turn their lives for the better with their own hard work, and not withheld methodically by the corrupt system that was oppressing them even to this day, was killed by these very perpetrators. The next day, this rumor was aggressively spread by everyone who heard of it as if concerned all of their lives and future. The wake-up call given by Whisper had already filled their hearts with anguish, and now, after learning that they actually had someone who was already proven to be a hero of the common people, and wanted to save all the citizens across the whole empire, was also killed off. The rage and hatred they harbored was no longer about their place in the society. The only option left was a war for their entire existence. The public outrage reached its peak after the mysterious death of Con Salvatore was brought up to people's eyes again, and added with the fact that he was someone chosen by the founding fathers of the empire, destined to change their fates as he was born a commoner just like them. Now flamed the already violent flames into a wrathful wildfire. There was no reason left to tolerate the existence of the government anymore. It was now the people versus the government on all fronts. The following day, people had suddenly gathered around squares, crowds now filled with people of all the inhabitant species, genders, races, and professions. But unlike before, people suddenly had gathered resources to protest on a completely different scale. They had all the resources to carry on long-term protests, and equipment to defend themselves against law enforcement, and some even had weapons such as Molotov cocktails and acid balloons to throw on the government forces. Suddenly, the crowd that didn't even have basic support to continue marches for more than a day, now was armed to the brim. And the credit went to none other than 7 Deadly Sins members again, as they had already received all these resources in the past week, systematically smuggled to all of their bases without anyone getting a single hint. This time, the immense wealth gathered by the Underworld organization finally turned useful, whether it was the safety gear or even weapons that even a normal person who had no access to mana could use, were provided in abundance by the members masquerading among the crowd as fellow protesters. Whether it was food, utilities, or even banners with signs showcasing their disdain for the governmental authorities, they had everything that would last the whole empire's protesters for weeks. This time, people who worked for companies didn't bother going to work. People who worked at properties and enterprises owned by the noble clans and factions didn't go for their work either. The entire business world was no exception, because all the trade that was carried on the backs of the citizens was now halted, as there weren't enough workers to even operate a flying cargo ship. With the working class abandoning all of these factions, their silence resounded the loudest across the entire Rocco's empire. In one of the taverns where people had gathered, "All right, everyone, the shop's closing. See you at the rallies," spoke a fat and bald old man with a gray grizzly beard. "All right, see you later," spoke one of the customers. Following him, all the people in the establishment also left. Except there was a young red-skinned thrall who sat there quietly while adorning a black cloak, his eyes filled with contempt. "Why waste your time on this nonsense? It's not like we can do anything against those powerful people anyway." The protests that occurred all over the empire over a week ago didn't even last for a couple of days before everything went back to the same as before. Why even bother and lose your lives so meaninglessly when you know that nothing in this world will change? He spoke, his tone filled with resignation. "So you mean we should all just give up and not do anything as long as it ensures one's survival?" asked the old man while he started cleaning all the tables with a cloth. "Yeah, causing civil unrest could lead to far many deaths. What's even the point of people getting killed by pissing off the authority, because in the end, our lives are just a number to the people in power. This whole march won't be different than the others before," he iterated sternly. To the old man, this young seemed conflicted, unable to decide his own sense of morality. "Is that so?" asked the old man, and continued with a tone filled with the wisdom of a more experienced person among the two. "What kind of a world would you like to live in, young man? A world where you could at least own up to your actions, or be caged within an invisible jail?" asked the old man. "What do you mean?" asked the young thrall. "Imagine 2 scenarios. In the first one, you have either worked hard to achieve success in life, or you've let go of opportunities and become a useless bum. In this case, you can at least say that regardless of the outcome, you were in charge of your fate," declared the old man in a stern voice. "In the second one, no matter how hard you worked or tried to climb the social ladder in terms of wealth, prestige, and advanced yourself in life based on your personal standards, you had a system built around in the society. A system that methodically caused your downfall regardless of your efforts without even you knowing its existence." he iterated as his voice turned heavy. In this case, you will never have hope to ascend to a higher living standard. You will be forever treated as an afterthought. Your children will suffer the same fate, and so will their children. Your grandchildren and their grandchildren will have their destinies written by those who wanted to oppress you since birth just to maintain their own supremacy. His words echoed in the tavern. Do you think your life now has more meaning and worth if you do not even get out in the open to fight for your and your future generations' future? Or by sitting here, you'd already sentenced them to a fate no different than that of a slave? Asked the old man. The young red-skinned thrall's eyes turned wide open as he clenched his fist. After listening to the old man, he realized that all those people of the Empire joining the protests weren't fools who didn't care if they died. No, they cared far more for the future of their families and their upcoming generation's fate, to the point they'd rather risk dying a meaningless death instead of keeping their mouths shut and embracing living like a slave with no rights to even live. Thud! The young thrall suddenly got up from his chair and stood tall. His eyes were now far more focused and resolute. He didn't speak another word or express his opinions via any gesture. Nod. All he did was nod and walk out of the tavern, heading towards the direction where all the people were gathering for the march. The old man let out a faint smile as he saw the young thrall's body merging with the rest of the crowd. He then finally closed his shop and joined the protest himself, ready to fight for his voice among the many. The red-skinned thrall appeared at one of the corners of the street as he saw the old man joining the other citizens. "The people are ready," spoke this thrall with a visible content smile. Soon, his appearance started changing, and a man with black eyes and hair now stood in his spot. Beep! A telecommunication artifact rang in his hand, and a voice reached from the other end. "Master, they've all arrived here." "Good. Tell them to spread across the Empire," spoke this man with eyes full of determination as he just confirmed the will of the people. "It's time for the revolution." The day of the revolution, as per Khan's original plans, had finally come. The flames of resentment against the upper class, the elites of society, and the privileged who still controlled the system, such as noble clans and factions, was at its peak. Unlike the last time when Whisper had exposed the truth of the government and reality of how the freedom that was supposed to make everyone in the Empire equal to each other was nothing but a fabricated illusion to keep them caged in an invisible cage devised to control their lives for even the future generations to come. "We want true freedom. We shall not be oppressed anymore. Disbandment of the noble clans and factions in the Empire. Kick out all these vermins from the government. We want to vote for our leaders. Abolish the government made up of nobles and elites." Slogans and chants like this echoed throughout all the major cities and small towns of the Rocco's Empire as the unified protest had miraculously synced together and brought forth all the citizens of the nation, standing strong and unified as a single voice of revolution against the corrupt regime. Most of these protests weren't peaceful because the last time they chose this route, people could use mana and had unlocked fighter classes of various professions, had captured and sent thousands of people to jail. The previous nationwide protest was squashed like an elephant stepping on an ant, so people already knew that peace was no longer an option. Thus, armed with gear to defend themselves and weapons such as batons, Molotov cocktails, swords, and even pitchforks that were given by fellow protesters, the tension against the governmental authority was now on the verge of a serious outbreak. Bang! Crash! Thousands of law officers, armed with proper armors, shields, and weapons, were facing a sea of inhabitants of Rocco's Empire, barely able to protect the government institutions and buildings behind them as people of various species now took the matters in their hands. In many places across the Empire, the mob had become violent and started using all the weaponry and gear they were provided with. Boom! Buildings that were either courthouses, municipal offices, or even law enforcement headquarters started catching fire, given the sheer number of millions of protesters in each of these cities and towns, since people had enough of staying weak and helpless for their entire lives. Just watching these places burn brought them immense satisfaction because it wasn't like these institutions actually worked for their betterment. To the angry mob, these buildings represented the corrupt system that had ruined all their lives and stood as the monument of oppression that would befall their future generations unless they got rid of it. Throw more explosives. "Burn down these bastards who leech off of our lives and our hard work," shouted a 3-meter-tall bearkin with blue fur. "Hold them back. Don't let them pass," shouted a guard at the gates with his shield blocking people from breaking the blockade. Just because the world was filled with magic didn't mean everyone could use it. Normal guards and law enforcement officers like this guard could only rely on the gear that was given to them. Many times, such gear had magic abilities and elemental properties, similar to how the adventurers and mercenaries did. However, a low-level guard like him and many others standing beside him only had the standard gear that could stop only a couple of normal civilians. Also, some species were bigger and stronger in many aspects, given their species and bloodline abilities. A normal human like him could only do so much. Roar! Suddenly, an ear-deafening roar resounded, sending shockwaves in the 100-meter perimeter. A Grandmaster rank 3-meter-tall gray tigerkin walked out of the building. Fully armored and holding a massive club and a rectangular shield stood tall. By normal people's standards, a Grandmaster was akin to 100 armed warriors who could also use mana and had fighting skills and classes. Suddenly, the atmosphere had shifted, and hundreds of protesters stiffened up. Because the last time Grandmasters showed up during a previous wave of protests, most of the people had either fled or given up. Those foolish enough to stay or who couldn't run away quickly ended up jailed. However, this time people didn't falter or have their conviction broken. Many simply clenched their fists hard and took defensive stances to face whatever may come. The commoner class had enough already, and there was no intention to back down this time. It was right then. "Throw them!" shouted a snakekin among the crowd. Clang! Soon, dozens of spherical artifacts resembling glowing orbs with runes over them fell at the back of the defense line, closer to the Grandmaster Tigerkin. "What the hell are these?" spoke the Grandmaster, his face expressing confusion. Boom! Suddenly, the orbs exploded and released tangible magic formations that spread across the whole half-a-kilometer radius. These formations then disappeared, but not a single person was hurt. Alas, the Grandmaster Tigerkin noticed a difference in the air around him. "Damn it! These are mana-sealing artifacts." He spoke because he could no longer sense any mana in the surroundings, and neither could his own body use any of it. With his ability to use mana sealed, he was just a strong warrior with a club and shield. A difference that could be overcome with numbers if other species members of the same size attacked him. Damn it! How do these pests suddenly have these kind of high-grade artifacts? The government controls the use of these type of things in public places. Only adventurers and government forces are allowed to use them or have any access to. How come these protesters suddenly have dozens of them? He spoke in a bewildered tone, his expression darkening. "That's it. Attack!" shouted the same snakekin, and following his war cry, dozens of taller protesters belonging to demi-human species, such as wolfkins, ogres and orc, marched together and bashed their massive bodies against the blockades. The angry mob then started attacking the government officials and the employees fleeing off the scene and started demolishing anything that came in sight. The burning buildings started catching more fire with time, and the angry mob didn't even care if these employees were just doing their job either. To them, the fact that they were still working for the government despite the clear outrage meant that they were on the side of the enemies. Similar scenarios occurred throughout the empire where the protests had turned into riots and absolute mayhem had taken place. Anarchy. That was the only word that could describe the situation. In every place, any person who could use mana, had fighting class or magical skills, was neutralized by these artifacts by the angry mob. "If only we had had these things before," said a protester with a satisfied smile. Nobody questioned how such a useful and advanced piece of artifacts and weapons had suddenly appeared unlike the previous wave over a week ago. All they wanted was to let out the anger in their hearts and punish those whom they had deemed as their oppressors. The voice of reason had left their minds because even the most docile and peaceful people across the empire knew the harsh reality. They tried the peaceful way before, and they were subjugated by the people in power with almost no resistance. But now that they had access to such means, they could level the battlefield and have a fair chance to fight back. Even the most amicable person knew in their heart that once you cross a certain line, violence was the only way. The government's response to this sudden riot was completely unorganized, since none in the authority even had heard any whispers of a riot happening today. Most of the powerful people, such as Master Rank, Grandmaster Rank, and Semi-Saints, didn't even have a chain of commands ordering them at the same time. The government only had 30% of the Empire's total fighting power, since many people chose to either join clans or become adventurers or mercenaries after unlocking mana and classes. And obviously, the clans and factions, the business organizations and associations, worked to preserve their own benefits and assets, then lending the government a hand in such dire circumstances where their own properties and businesses were also facing the similar attacks from the sea of angry protesters. The Rocco's empire was set ablaze by the fires of revolution. The people had taken arms, and their fury knew no bounds. But what could a bunch of people with just weapons do when powerhouses like Saints existed in this world? The dynamic shifted the moment Saint rank people from the government showed up. Boom! Just their auras filled with world energy were enough to swat them like ants. Ha! A swarm of mosquitoes acting like they suddenly dare to fight the dragons. I wonder how many of these insects will live on if I raise my saint pressure a bit more. Spoke a saint who appeared in one of these riots within a province of the capital. His aura had subdued and stopped people from moving. Rest of the Rocco's empire was no different, as the public was being incapacitated with mere pressure from the saints, just like the previous protests. Swoosh! It was right then that new and unknown beings of mysterious origins, covered in dark gray hoods and cloaks, started appearing over these sites. I would like to see you try. The voice suddenly sent chills through the surroundings as these beings released their auras and threw off the saints' pressure. Do not worry, people of Rocco's empire, spoke one of these powerful saints, the biggest city situated at the western side of the empire. This cloaked man with a massive giant's sword on his back let out a domineering and tyrannical aura. The same was the situation in dozens of other places across the empire where all these new arrivals had made their presence known. The cavalry is here. The sudden appearance of the hooded and cloaked individuals who stopped all the saints employed by the government sent shock among the masses across all the affected sites in the Rocco's empire. In one place, a man with a massive giant's sword on his back showed up, and 2 black horns protruded out of his hood. At another site appeared a 3-meter-tall saint with a massive shield and a battle-axe. A cloaked figure with 2 katanas. Another person with a black and golden trident. A mage with a glowing golden scepter. A priest with an emerald scepter in hand. An archer having 2 wings with a white and golden bow in his hand flapped his wings. A cloaked assassin with 2 glowing purple daggers appeared in front of a powerful saint. Another mage with glowing orb-like artifacts whirling around him also appeared in one of the big cities. 3 more powerful saints of unknown appearance showed themselves in the eastern side of the empire, protecting the people from the saints unleashed by the government. And within the capital Rathna, 4 powerful entities appeared. One had a black sword. One held a golden and blue scepter with 2 dragons coiling around it. There was a female summoner with 2 golden cube-like artifacts floating around her. And finally, a man with a katana on his waist. Although the majority of their body portions were covered and their faces were well hidden, people could tell that these individuals who suddenly appeared were powerful saints just based on their auras and the quality of their visible weapons. However, things didn't just end with these 15 people. 15 more saints with the exact physical build as the last person appeared and covered more places across the capital districts and provinces. On top of it, people in black and golden armors, having the insignia of an unknown kingdom, also appeared, replicating the same action of protecting the citizens of the empire from the saint pressure. Unbeknownst to them, these more than a dozen saints were the royal guards of a very powerful entity of Vantria. At this moment, the people interfering against the saints from the government were actually more than 40. Because for the first time, all of Khan's subordinates and allies, such as Vildred, Cassandra, Morrigan, and Argos, had appeared all over the Rocco's empire, showing up exactly when needed to protect the protesting commoners of the empire. Since Khan's own cosmic replicas were as strong as a peak 6-stage saints, and presently, he could make at least 15 of them, the gap between powerful opponents from the government was bridged drastically. That count alone made more than what the government had across the entire empire. Mainly because the noble clans, factions, and even the military were separate forces from the central government. Their lack of communication and reliance on each other played in their favor. Khan had taken everything into account. His spy network had already gathered intel on which place had saints available as a final force to defend and what their rank as saints, their professions, and their elemental affinities. Because the identities of those working in the government were often public knowledge, unlike the noble clans or the hidden saints. Khan had sent the strongest warriors from his side to where they could face the powerful enemies. On top of it, in the entire Rocco's empire, there were less than 30 saints with a 5th stage rank or above, and only 12 of them were part of the government. Even if the government itself was comprised of these noble clans and factions, they couldn't publicly allow their clansmen to join the rule. And even if these saints from the said clans came, it all depended on how strong they were, because in front of a 5th stage saint, dozens of 1st or even 3rd stage saints were just toddlers with no teeth. Killing them with just their auras was easily achievable, and the class system within the empire itself was helpful. Normally, a 5th stage saint would either be a clan leader, hold too big of a responsibility or authority in a very important position within the government. Such people rarely showed up to fight even under such dire circumstances since such incidents were beneath them. And this very disparity between the social class and even among the saints based on their ranks, Khan was counting on it. His plans led to massive violence across the Rocco's empire. But even that violence was predetermined, premeditated, and carefully orchestrated. Why? Because no amount of goading or inspiring speeches about their nation or the motherland, or the injustice faced by the common citizens of the empire, would lead an entire civilization to overthrow their government. This would be even more ludicrous of a thought and impossible to achieve just because some dead guy showed up and claimed that he was the rightful heir to the throne and should become the emperor. Khan knew that people liked their personal autonomy to choose their leaders, their representatives, and even their neighborhood association's president. The choice and resolve to partake in the uprising and join the crusade to overthrow the current reigning regime should come from one's own heart. Only then could they become a true instrument of revolution. And that was what Khan had been counting on since the very beginning when he revealed his plan to Argos, Morrigan, and Vildred that day. With Rathnar's expertise and Khan's personal knowledge of the human mindset, they orchestrated everything. Whisper was just the appetizer. This revolution was the main dish. But even the 3.6 billion inhabitants of the Rocco's empire had no idea. The freedom they were fighting for was just an illusion of choice given to them by the man named Khan Salvator. This ingenious and terrifying cunningness of this man even made Argos Belmont, the revenant sovereign of Vantria, to call him diabolical. It was one thing to manipulate a group of people, but to turn the whole empire into his puppets. That was something unheard of and seemingly impossible to achieve. However, Khan used the very social structure that governed the empire as his weapon of choice to completely dismantle the government itself. He used the disparity among the status quo and the resentment built up in people's hearts as the fuel to spread the wildfire. The stage was set, but now was the time for the main performer's entrance. Flap! People in those black hoods start revealing their appearance. Jugram, Blackwell, Rudra, Omega, Tobias, Oliver, Cyril, Armin, Ronan, and the other 3 subordinates Khan created before leaving, along with Cassandra, Morrigan, Vildred, Argos, and his royal guards. They had already outmatched the saints from the government both in terms of quality and quantity. Xing. It was at this moment, all of their presence was projected through a holographic screen, appearing in the sky. The artifacts were used by the members of the 7 deadly sins spread across the billions of protesters in the whole empire. Do not worry, people of Rocco's empire. You're not without your guardians. There are still people who are willing to put their lives on the line to defend you, spoke one of the hooded people under the dark gray cloak. He slowly started taking the hood off and then completely uncovered his appearance. Gasp! Millions of people gasped as soon as his face appeared on the holographic screens, regardless what part of the empire they watched from. The rightful heir is here, spoke a person within the crowd of protesters. with an instrument similar to a loudspeaker. A similar announcement was made at the exact same time right after the man's face, and his signature appearance with a dark gray long coat with silver embroidery was revealed to the entire population. At this moment, people across the Rocco's empire chimed in unison, their hearts filled with hope and joy as they proudly proclaimed, "The Emperor is back." A man proclaimed dead, once a beacon of hope and prosperity for his people, now emerged in front of the eyes of the masses once again. The name Consalvator, which shook the very core of the empire nearly 5 years ago, achieved a similar feat one more time. This time, his face was more mature and his tone even more regal as well as deserving of respect. Though he wore the same attire from 5 years ago, those who remembered him could tell that he aged but turned even more dependable and resolute just by looking at his expression. "The Emperor is back." One after another, this very chant echoed across the Rocco's empire incessantly, spoken by the spies of the 7 deadly sins. Yes, the Emperor is back. Following their proclamation, soon, billions of protesters started voicing the same chant as those words suddenly became the outcry of emotions and joy filled in their hearts with Khan's sudden emergence at this moment. The chant itself was part of the plan, because once the feeling of hope and salvation rekindled in the hearts of people, the first big announcement would also become the voice of the people themselves. And no one among these seas of citizens across the empire had any qualms against it. Because the rumor about Khan Salvator being the chosen successor by the first sage Lesrin Michelson and Rathnar Whitlock, the first emperor of the Rocco's empire, was already spread and settled in their minds. It was the final straw after the failed attempt a week ago that pushed all the people to join their hands and collectively protest against the government in the first place. And now that the supposed rightful heir to the throne and their savior, who was tried and tested by these ancient legendary figures of the bygone era, was in front of their eyes, people wanted to believe in this final ray of hope that they thought was stolen from them. Flutter. Khan's long coat fluttered as the location he appeared at was revealed. It was the Department of Justice, the main body that set most of the laws and decided how the judicial system operated in this empire. In a way, the massive 2-kilometer-wide and 3-story building represented the laws that bound the citizens because most of the time, as long as someone came from an influential background or had a connection to any of the noble clans or factions, they got out scot-free regardless of their crimes. Sometimes it was the jury or the judge that was bribed, sometimes it was the prosecution that failed to gather enough evidence, and lastly, evidence itself was considered inadmissible for one reason or another. The court of law was nothing but a playground where even the innocent would be charged for crimes they didn't commit because of this twisted social structure controlled by the elites. The government, the court of law, the leaders and politicians, they were all the same. The very foundation of this institution represented the injustice that was meted out on the masses for over a century. One would think that imperialism or monarchy was bad, but the truth was democracy was no different, because in all of these settings of rule, it was oligarchs and their allies who controlled all the lawmakers, the politicians, the presidents, and the economy. The illusion that was freedom had never been the truth of the world. It was just a perspective provided to the population to keep them chained and docile enough so they would not cause a revolt. What Khan wanted to establish was no different. He was no warrior of justice either. But unlike these oligarchs and elites, he wanted to fight for those who didn't have the strength to fight for themselves, because he too was just a normal citizen of the country back on Earth. Also, becoming the emperor of the Rocco's empire was part of a grand scheme to prepare for the Great War. However, it didn't mean that it was an insignificant afterthought for Khan. He simply wished to free people and give them a choice to join the fight for the sake of the world. And the first step was to demonstrate to people that he was indeed the promised heir and the rightful ruler that they needed him to be at this moment. Khan's face turned calm as he took out a communication artifact and whispered to all his allies listening throughout the empire, "Do not kill them. We need all the saints alive for the Great War. But you're allowed to put the fear of God in their minds," ordered Khan. And as soon as his command was received, all of them decided to engage their respective opponents. Swoosh! It was right then that a powerful saint appeared in front of Khan. "It's been a while. spoke Khan as he looked at this new arrival. To think that you were still alive after all that. What a tragic joke, spoke the person in an elderly voice. However, despite the harrowed voice, one could barely breathe in his presence as he was one of the only 3 seventh-stage saints in the Rocco's empire. The elderly saint was an elf, someone who lived for more than 500 years at this point. The elf saint in front of Khan was none other than Jeremiah Themis, leader of the demi-human faction as well as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Rocco's empire. He was one of the 3 most influential figures in the whole empire, and in the past, Khan had burned all the ties with him after becoming the sovereign of Verlassen fiefdom. During Khan's reign, a demonkin heir of a clan that was part of the demi-human faction, namely Victor Apicius, had massacred thousands of innocent soldiers and tried to use the incident and blame Khan as a massive failure as the sovereign. Khan did find out later about the demonkin heir being the culprit, and had Jugram torture Victor to death and finally used the corpse to merge with the subordinate, granting the latter with true demon bloodline and an evolution. Back then, Khan had the choice to keep the matter silent, but knowing that Victor was ordered by the demi-human faction to do so, he wanted to give them the taste of their own medicine. Khan revealed to the whole empire that it was the demi-human faction's fault by staging a fake footage of Victor saying that he was ordered by the faction leader aka Jeremiah Themis and the elders of the faction. Back then, the public backlash alone forced the demi-human faction to publicly take accountability, and all their associated clans and businesses suffered massive losses. And especially after Khan faking his death, all the clan and faction leaders were forced to step down publicly from their respective positions in the government. However, just last year, through systematic corruption and using their ties, all of the 3 seventh-stage faction leaders regained their positions by using the very democracy after the previous official's term ended. So in a way, the social reformation caused by Khan's death brought change only on the surface. The blood beneath the skin was still black. Hence, for his first target right after making his reappearance public to the empire, Khan came to destroy this very monument that everyone knew as one of the biggest pillars of the corrupt system of the empire. And why are you here, acting as if this place of truth and law stands for oppression? Asked the elderly elven mage saint with a hunched back. Crack. Khan started cracking his fingers as the projection artifact showed his face across the empire, with billions of people watching him. I'm just here to burn this building to the ground, and maybe beat the shit out of you along the way, spoke Khan haughtily while releasing his intense aura full of malicious darkness. My clan and faction have suffered too much till now ever since you showed up, child. Do not test my patience with such a disrespectful tone. I might forget my position and kill you instead if you keep provoking me, spoke Jeremiah Themis, his tone soft but words giving a deadly warning. To his words, Khan only smirked and replied as he spoke with a quaint smile. I'd like to see you try. In front of the whole Rocco's empire watching, Khan openly challenged one of the 3 strongest beings of the empire. Jeremiah Themis was one of the 3 peak 7th stage saints of the empire. Unless the other faction leaders showed up, no one was his match on paper. But suddenly, Khan showed no sense of fear or dread while facing him and even taunted the old elven saint to try to kill him. Humph! As you wish, you impudent brat. I will show you and those who are watching why no one dares to fight me, spoke the old elf with wrinkled skin over his face and hands. Domain of impartiality, he spoke. Swoom. There was no loud noise, no explosions, and nor were there any shockwaves of terrifying magnitudes. Both Jeremiah and Khan were simply transported into a different realm. Shimmer. Khan now saw a scenario reminiscent of a galaxy with countless stars and blue hue spread across the boundless sky. But there was indeed a solid structure supporting them. First form, Lady of Justice, shouted the old elven saint with the hunched back. Swoosh. Both Khan and Jeremiah now appeared on 2 different ends of a ginormous weighing scale that was held by the statue of the Lady of Justice. The ginormous statue was at least 2 kilometers in height alone, while the plates on each end were 200 meters wide. Shing. Cling. Suddenly, multiple magic formations with archaic runes and patterns appeared above their heads, covering both Khan and the old elf saint. This is the reason why I have remained undefeated throughout my reign as the leader of the demi-human faction. After I became a 5th stage saint 180 years ago, no one has won a single battle against me," declared the old elf in a resolute tone. "What you're witnessing right now is the same power that helped in defeating the previous emperor of the Rakos Empire over a century ago. I was merely a peak 6th stage saint back then. Yet my domain helped tremendously in suppressing the emperor's powers, who was an intermediate 8th stage saint. It allowed those two to land the killing blows and end the emperor's life. Even the other 2 faction leaders do not dare to fight me at this stage." He spoke in a confident tone. Because they know that it will be a battle they can never win despite all their unique domains and bloodline abilities. People like you, who seek only the warrior's way, cannot comprehend the uniqueness of the law of reality to which I have devoted my life practicing. Behold the majesty of my power, Con Salvator, for this is the last day of your life," he declared in a majestic voice. "This is the law of balance." The law of balance, the unique law Con hadn't even heard about, precisely because it was very rare to the point that people had almost forgotten it. Yet here he was, facing an actual practitioner of the law. "Ugh!" groaned Con as he felt an unknown power attacking his mind and body. Suddenly, Con felt that his entire body was drained out of his world energy, and his physical strength was declining rapidly. It stopped at a certain level, but even he could tell that he was now significantly weaker. Warning: the host's entire body has been affected by the opponent's domain. All of the physical stats, magical powers, ranks of skills, and spells have been halved and granted to the opponent. The host's vitality has been exchanged with the opponent, as well as all the armors and weapons have their strength and range restricted by 50%. The host's domain has also lost its range and effectiveness by half, reported the system. "Oh my, what kind of power is this? This law of balance you speak of?" asked Con, his face sweating, but he kept maintaining his balance. But before he could get an answer, another change happened within the scales. Crack! An ethereal green aura started emanating from the old elven saint's body, while a gray aura encompassed Con. "What the hell is this?" shouted Con as another unexpected development took place, because out of nowhere, the hunched old elven saint suddenly had his face and skin de-aged. His spine straightened, and his entire body rejuvenated, turning him into a young scholarly elf. But Con, on the other hand, had his hair turned white and grew a very long beard that reached his waist almost instantly, and all forms of cracks and wrinkles formed over his face and body, as if he had been turned into a very old man. "Ha ha ha! To grant me such youthful appearance again, making me look younger as I was at the age of only 200 years, you must have very strong regeneration abilities and even more tremendous life force, young man. I was afraid that you'd destroy the building first using your saint pressure, so I made the first move. Looks like it was a good choice to use my domain from the very beginning instead of crushing you like an ant," spoke Jeremiah Themis, looking like a handsome and reinvigorated elven royalty while Con was turned into an old man in his 80s. "Tell me something," asked old man Con. "If it is indeed the law of balance, as you say, since it took something from me and gave it to you, there must be something I also received from you other than just this old age. Am I right?" hypothesized Con. "Correct. It's not just your strength, world energy, or your youth that was exchanged with me, but you also received what I was lacking," spoke Jeremiah with a conceited look and a visible sly smile on his face. "I was a mere magician class elf when I started, but with the unique rank class I achieved with the law of balance, I possess the arbiter class, a class with an ability to diminish the difference in strength and individual powers," explained the now youthful elf. "So you take what I have advantage in and give me all the burden in aspects where you're lacking compared to me. And you call this the domain of impartiality?" asked Con with furrowed brows, calling out the hypocrisy of the name. "Well, it is impartial to me, the user of the domain, bridging the gap between me and the opponent by balancing out the differences. As for my enemies, it deems them guilty as criminals in the court of law. The guilty would obviously receive punishment in the form of restrictions and even having their life force shared with me. With the strength, youth, and immense world energy that I have taken from you, I'm far more superior than I already was. Shame that our lives are entangled now. He spoke in a disgruntled tone. What do you mean? Are we prohibited from attacking each other or something? Inquired Khan in a hoarse tone as his wrinkled eyebrows formed an arch over his forehead. Yes, your life force will slowly drain away as long as my domain is active. I cannot hurt you, but you can't hurt or attack me, because you will receive every form of injury or pain that you inflict upon me. The same shall happen to me if I do that to you, iterated Jeremiah in an annoyed tone. Alas, it may take days, but you will eventually die. He declared in a dominant but also assured voice as if the events he cited were inevitable. After I kill you, this exchange shall remain with me. Who knows, maybe I will be able to break through after all these years and finally become an 8th stage saint. He spoke in a prideful tone. His eyes expressed both discontent and disregard for Khan, as if he were a dead man and the winner of this battle was already decided. Good. Thanks for telling me your weakness, spoke the old man Khan with a sinister smirk. What weakness? I have none, spoke Jeremiah with a haughty countenance. But instead of responding to the demi-human faction leader, Khan spoke to himself with a wry smile. Miyamoto-sensei would lose his mind if he saw me doing this, spoke Khan as he held the grip of Muramasa with both hands. But instead of the enemy, the blade was pointing in the opposite direction. Jeremiah's eyes suddenly widened, and his expression turned mortified. Wait! However, before Jeremiah Themis could move a muscle, with the entire Rocco's empire watching, stab, Khan committed seppuku. Instead of attacking the opponent as all the citizens of the empire watched, Khan stabbed his own stomach and committed seppuku. Stab. Blood started dripping from the hilt of his katana, and the other end of the blade passed through his back. But why did Khan suddenly go mad and do this to himself rather than facing his opponent in a frontal clash? Because he knew that none of them would work in this particular fight. Jeremiah Themis, the leader of the demi-human faction, was a powerful being who remained undefeated even after the imperial family was massacred. The fact that the other 2 faction leaders didn't dare to fight him over a century also attested to that truth. But after learning the powers of the law of balance by pretending to be weak and helpless in front of the elven saint, Khan figured out its biggest drawback instantly. Because the law of balance was similar to the law of equivalent exchange in a way. Though he received the biggest debuffs to his powers, the underlying fact that neither Jeremiah or Khan could harm each other until the latter died after a few days meant one thing, that the curse itself was a blessing in disguise. If both parties were prohibited from harming each other, what about harming yourself? Ah! And just as he expected, Jeremiah Themis also received the exact same wound where Khan stabbed himself. His white clothes now colored red from the torso as the blood spilled out of his stomach, and the young elf now started bleeding profusely. Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Laughed Khan hysterically. Look at you, dumb bastard. Looks like I made a mistake by coming here. Who knew that I would be fighting against the weakest of the 3 top saints of the empire? He mocked the opponent despite being a literal sword stabbed in his body. What do you mean? How am I weak? Asked the young Jeremiah, using healing potions and artifacts on himself. Soon, the massive wound started closing itself as the elf healed his injuries within a minute. Pull. Khan pulled Muramasa out of his body, and his instant regeneration ability closed the wound in the blink of an eye. Your power is just a gimmick, spoke Old Man Khan with a disappointed tone. Sure, it can work and easily overpower anyone with a physical body who can die with a fatal wound. No amount of regenerative ability can help save someone's life if the core within their heart or even their head explodes. However, what if someone can't die from those issues? Asked Khan in a hoarse tone as he gave a sinister smile. Silence. A harrowing silence ensued as Jeremiah's expression turned ashen, as if he had seen a ghost. There are species in the world that don't have a solid physical form. Look at our empire itself. There are those who can turn into a literal fog, and some don't even have a heart or a brain. You got so far only because none of those people were able to become a saint or had to fight with you," explained Khan. Him pointing out the biggest flaw of Jeremiah's domain that came with his law of balance, that it heavily depended upon enemy species and unique constitution. And as a matter of fact, it was the truth. Every powerful enemy he fought till now had a physical form, and even with their powers, at most they could escape from him but not actually harm his body. And obviously, they wouldn't think about stabbing themselves to their deaths either, and hence the flaw in Jeremiah Themis' domain of impartiality became his biggest advantage. Yet here came a man who was unafraid to do what scared everyone else: death. Khan wasn't afraid of death at this point after his training under Romulus Lycaeus. What importance would one more death have to a man who has literally died more than 1,000,000 times? Slash. Next, Khan slashed his left forearm with the swing of his weapon. "Arg!" wailed Jeremiah in intense pain as his own left arm was cut off. He quickly used his world energy to stop the arm from falling and used his own means to heal the injury. However, stab. Khan summoned Gungnir and had the spear stab himself in the back, making a massive hole in his chest. Blurg! Jeremiah retched a massive chunk of blood and innards as a similar hole appeared on his body. Had he not been a saint, he would have died instantly. Cut, slash, stab, crack. One after another, Khan used various means to inflict fatal wounds on himself. Each injury was so severe that he could die at any moment. But because of his own abilities, such as instant regeneration and space law, it took no time to recover from them. However, the same was not the case for the Elven Saint, who didn't have these innate abilities and could only rely on spells, artifacts, and high-grade potions. For the next hour, this very scenario repeated as Khan kept getting creative with the ways of torturing himself. One of the citizens of the Empire, watching this horrifying scene, slowly spoke. "Our Emperor, is bats hit crazy?" Khan kept torturing Jeremiah, who for some reason was unable to deactivate his own domain. "Looks like there's another flaw with the law of balance, huh? It seems to me that you can't even stop your domain from completing our exchange," said Khan as he figured out another drawback of the opponent's power. "Will it stop until I lose my life force completely and die?" said Khan with a sardonic tone. "Or will it no longer function unless just one of us dies?" questioned Khan with a sadistic smile. "Gee, I wonder what would happen if I do this," said Khan with a wicked smile as he raised Muramace's blade over his neck. He slowly cut his Adam's apple over the throat. A visible gash was made, and Khan's neck started bleeding. Ugh! However, the groan was heard from the other end because Jeremiah's neck was gushing with blood. He was using his spells, artifacts, and potions to heal himself and protect his own life. Yawn. Khan, who saw this from afar on the opposite plate, yawned as if he was bored out of his mind. "This isn't even funny anymore. Let's end this. Your head for mine," declared Khan as he revealed a devilish smirk. Jeremiah, who was already barely holding on to dear life, was petrified. Khan then held the grip of the katana and placed the blade over the right side of his neck. "Let's die together, you elf bastard," said Khan with a grin so wide that one would mistake him for a demon. "Stop! Stop, you crazy psychotic bastard!" shouted Jeremiah, his expression mortified. His body slouched as if he accepted his defeat. The entirety of the Rocco's empire saw how one of the three strongest beings in the whole empire now knelt in front of Khan, defeated and ashamed. This was the first and biggest loss Jeremiah had experienced after becoming a fifth-stage saint. He had remained undefeated for almost 200 years, but now lost to a young man who was only 30 years old. You win," declared the Elven Saint. Jeremiah could go on for days with the amount of potions, spells, and artifacts he had till Khan died of his domain's power acquired from the law of balance. "My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined," said Khan while rolling his eyes. "You know the best part of this victory for me?" asked Khan with a shameless smirk. "I didn't even have to use my domain," he openly declared. As soon as those words echoed, The whole empire watching this battle also realized that Khan indeed didn't use his domain either. Most of them didn't even know what a domain was before this fight between Khan and Jeremiah. But if the latter could use it, then there was definitely a chance that so could Khan. Jeremiah's expression turned from one of shame to disgust very quickly. Because not only did he lose against someone who was born just yesterday compared to his own age, but that kid didn't even unleash his full power. Were those words true? Is my power nothing but just a gimmick? Wondered the elven saint. For the first time in the 500 years of his life, he questioned his own existence because of the shameful defeat against Khan. Do you know why I didn't use my domain? Iterated Khan with a confident smirk. Because if I did, you really would have died when I stabbed myself the first time. He declared in a domineering voice. But don't think that your misery ends here. For me, sparing your life, said Khan as he made an outrageous but also stern demand. A devious smile appeared on his face as he finished his words. There should be a fair exchange.